Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Luffy Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Luffy Possessed Prophetic Abilities. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Luffy was lying on his back with a blank look on his face, staring up into the dark, beautiful evening sky littered with numerous stars as he contemplated on how to get out of his current predicament. He had sea stone cuffs on his wrists which apparently sapped his rubber powers, had numerous cuts, burns and bruises all over his body, had been starved for weeks, and most importantly he was feeling the effects of the lethal poison he was fed a couple days prior. He had no idea what to do as he laid there barely able to move his body. If it was an enemy, he could just punch them, and if that didn't work, just keep punching them until he won. No matter how badly he got injured, he would just keep fighting until the other person went down. But for poison, he had no idea what he could do. He was already in a weakened state due to cumulative effects of sea stone cuffs, wounds and starvation, but now with the addition of a lethal poison, he didn't see any way out. He was dying and he had no idea how to survive. Luffy tried to move his head, but barely managed to move it a few centimeters with great effort, and he darted his eyes looking around himself to see if he could find anything or anyone that could help him. He was lying on a grassy plain, but it wasn't green. Instead, it was dyed red with the blood of all the other dying people lying there just like him. They were all battered, burned, cut, starved, bruised, and would soon lose their life, just like him. Most of the others around him were already dead, and some of the few that were still alive or relatively uninjured were just staring at nothing and had an empty, hollow look in their eyes. Luffy recognized that look. He had seen it on some people in Grey Terminal over the years. The look of someone who had given up on life and were just waiting for death. He didn't like it one bit. He was a firm believer of you don't give up on living and fight until the very end. But he understood why they had that look though. The things he had seen the last few months were unlike anything he had ever seen, and realized just how messed up the world truly was. He had thought that the Grey Terminal fire was bad, but what he had gone through and seen over the last few months was 1,000 times worse. Luffy lifted his gaze back up to the sky after seeing that there was no one around that could help him, and saw the top of a magnificent castle to his right. He could also make out sounds of a party going on. Party, meat. There would be lots of meat there. If only he could somehow move his damn unresponsive body and make his way there. He had been trying for a long time, but his body just wouldn't move. Earlier, when he was trapped in a solitary cell, he was forcing his body to move even with all the near-lethal cuts and slashes, but once that poison was forced down his throat, his body had just locked up. He had been dragged from the cell he was in and thrown onto a wagon with tons of other dead, almost dead people, went on a little ride to the grassy plain and thrown out into the open where he was currently lying. It was the first he had seen the wide open sky in a few months, and thought he could finally make his escape. But he then realized that his body wouldn't move no matter how hard he tried. Over the past 2 days, he had managed to move only his hand extremely slowly and grab his prized straw hat, which was thrown next to him, and doing just that had taken him a tremendous amount of patience and will. As he lay there waiting for the last remnants of his life to die out, his mind wandered to the events that had led him here. It had all started a few months after Ace had left on his journey. Makino had shown up at the bandit hideout in the morning one day with that day's newspaper wanting to show a specific article and bounty of a certain fire user. Ace had finally gotten his first bounty, and it was also mentioned that he was the captain of the Spade Pirates. Luffy was of course ecstatic and had immediately called for a celebration. Thus, he, Makino, Daden, and the others all decided to throw a huge party at the hideout, and for the party, Luffy felt like eating a huge fish instead of the forest beasts like always. So he had gone out to fish on a boat he borrowed from one of the village fishermen to hopefully catch a huge fish or a sea king to satiate his enormous appetite. He had just said "I'll be back" to Makino and Daden before leaving to fish, and that was the last time he had seen either of them. The small fishing trip was where things had started to go wrong. While fishing, he had dozed off on his boat, and by the time he woke up, his boat had drifted somewhere far off as he couldn't see Dawn Island anywhere. He had just started rowing in a random direction, trusting that he will eventually find his island or come across someone who could help him, but unfortunately, he had kept rowing for 2 days without finding any other person or island. He hadn't packed any food, so he made do with fishing and eating raw fish. He had just kept on rowing with no particular direction in mind, and finally on the 3rd day since he left the island, he spotted a ship. It had no Jolly Roger, so they weren't pirates but looked to be a merchant ship or a cruise ship. He didn't care either way, as he was more concerned on getting water and food, so had just immediately rocketed himself onto the ship, ecstatic at finally having found someone. He had startled the people on the ship at first as they saw him just suddenly drop out of nowhere onto their ship, and seeing his stretchy limbs had just shocked them. But after a short explanation about his devil fruit and how he had gotten lost, they welcomed him on the ship and gave him some food and water. Luffy didn't like them for some reason. The way they looked at him irked him off, but he was way too hungry to care about such stuff. But he changed his opinion that they were nice people when they gave him food and also told him that they would take him home. What Luffy didn't know, at the time at least, was that the ship he had landed on dealt in slave trading, and seeing a devil fruit user literally fall from the sky onto their ship, they were very happy. Plus, he was a rubber human and they were sure that some rich asshole would find that very amusing, so they could sell him and make a huge profit. Seeing the very trusting nature and the hungry Luffy, they just decided to trick him and put some sleeping pills in the food they had given him. As soon as Luffy had fallen asleep, they put sea stone cuffs on him and kept him sedated until they could make the sell. When Luffy groggily opened his eyes the next time, he found himself in a dark, unfamiliar place with cuffs on his hands. The last thing he remembered was finally finding a ship, eating the food they gave him and falling asleep, so he couldn't understand where he was and how he had gotten there. But more importantly, his body felt extremely weak. He felt like how he would feel if he fell into the sea. A few seconds of looking around, and he finally realized he was in a mystery cage in a dark room. It was a mystery cage because when he touched the bars, his body felt even more weak and just went limp. He couldn't understand at the time what exactly was happening, but he later learned that the cuffs he was wearing and the cage were made with something called sea stone, which would apparently weaken devil fruit users the same way seawater did. He was shocked to find that there was even such a thing in the world. Luffy had called out for someone, but no one came in for a long time. He was in a dark cage all alone, weak, hungry, and freezing. He had dozed off again when someone finally did come in and woke him up. It was a man he couldn't see properly, and when he had asked what was happening and where he was, all he got in response was mocking laughter. The man then tried to explain that he was apparently a slave now and would spend the rest of his as a plaything for someone, but Luffy didn't understand. He was going to be the Pirate King, and the Pirate King is the freest man on the seas. So, of course, he wasn't going to be someone's slave. The slaver just laughed in his face when he voiced that out. The rest of the days in enslavement were honestly a blur for Luffy. The sea stone made him sluggish, and they gave him very small amounts of food, so he was always starving and couldn't understand much of what was going on. A few guys had come in, tried to order him to do a few things which he adamantly refused to do, so they started beating him up. But still Luffy stubbornly refused to do anything they ordered him to do, saying that no one can make him do things he didn't want to. A bunch of different people had come in trying to break him, but of course no one succeeded. The slavers were actually trying to break him and make him lose all hope, so that he would become an obedient slave and then present him to the celestial dragons or any of the royals at that year's reverie. But the resolute defiance in Luffy's eyes just didn't die no matter what they did. After the first few days, he had just defaulted to a blank look and glared at anyone that got close to him as if challenging them. They thought that if they presented a slave with such a defiant look, it would be their heads which would be rolling, so tried everything they could to make him obey them. Then he tried, but they all ultimately failed. No one had seen someone like Luffy who just refused to bow down to anyone while also challenging them. They had seen many unresponsive slaves, sure, but they would usually be ones who had blank, hollow eyes, had given up on life and didn't care what happened to them. But Luffy was different. He didn't lose the fire in his eyes, but also didn't obey a single order. They tortured, starved, and straight up mauled him almost to death, but he never once did anything they ordered him to do. It was simple at first, but when he didn't obey anyone for a week, a couple of slavers took it as a challenge upon themselves to break him, and pretty soon, it became a game of sorts among all of them to see who could break him first. So, they made sure to keep him barely alive and made it their mission to break him. Luffy didn't know anything though. All he knew was some assholes were trying to order him around, and hell if he was going to listen to them. He would rather die than obey them, and when they did things like press a gun to his forehead threatening to shoot if he didn't do something, he pressed his forehead closer to the gun, looked into their eyes, and dared them to shoot. That pissed them off the most though, and would beat him almost to death, but then would treat him just enough to keep him alive. The only times he almost broke was when they offered him food if he did something they ordered, but he had managed to stay strong. Few strong people with strange torture methods had all come in and tried to break him, but he didn't bow down to anyone. He didn't understand why they just didn't kill him and be done with, but what he didn't know was that it had become a challenging game for all the slavers. Luffy saw a lot of strange people during his days in that lonely dark cage. Some rich noble type people, who reminded him a lot of the assholes in Goa, had come in to take a look at him like he was an animal at a zoo, and even some strange people in actual bubble helmets. His hellish daily routine of being tortured broke one day when he had seen and laughed at a woman wearing a bubble helmet saying how funny she looked. That had somehow pissed her off, and his life became more hellish from then onward. The bubble helmet wearing woman had glared at Luffy when he laughed at her and then said some things to the slavers, who bowed down and nodded like a dog to everything she said. And soon, Luffy was finally taken out of the cage and brought to the outside, where he finally saw where he was. It was a large underground chamber with multiple cages lined up in multiple rows with all sorts of people inside the cages. As he was dragged along the corridor, he observed all the others in the cages. There were lots of humans, but also, for the first time in his life, he saw fishmen, animal-like people, people with long legs and long arms, and even one mermaid. and they all had one thing in common. They had a defeated and hollow look in their eyes as if they had given up on life. He wanted to talk and ask for information from them, but he was being dragged by two people with lots of others guarding him, so couldn't do much. He was soon brought into a fancy-looking room where the woman in the bubble helmet was sitting with a few other women, also in bubble helmets, while soldier-like stoic men were standing behind them. Luffy spent less than a week with the weird bubble helmet-wearing woman and her apparent equally weird bubble helmet-wearing friends. And the things they did to him during those days were the worst things anyone had done to him since he was caught. They treated him like a rag doll while laughing and giggling the whole time and did unspeakable horrors upon his body and mind. From burning, stabbing, taunting him by throwing food to the ground and telling him lick it off the ground, humiliating him by throwing rotten food on him, making him watch as they ate and wasted food, stepping on him with sharp heels, making him fight other slaves, making him a steed, whipping him, and so on. What baffled Luffy the most was when a little girl, barely 10 years old, in a similar bubble helmet and clothes had come in and started stabbing and burning him while taunting him just like the other women, all the while laughing and giggling as if she was playing with toys. He was further baffled when 3 more children came in and treated him in a similar fashion. Luffy had looked into the eyes of the soldiers holding him down while the women and children did things to him, and they all had blank, steely looks in their eyes. That was enough for him to understand this was a regular and normal thing for them. But even with the bubble people, Luffy still didn't obey any order they gave. No matter how much they tortured and taunted him, he took it all without muttering a single word and didn't obey a single thing they ordered him to do. He didn't crawl a single step when they treated him as a steed. He didn't move a single muscle when they asked him to fight other slaves and just let himself get beaten up. He didn't break when delicious-looking food was thrown on him and he could smell the delicious food just millimeters away from his mouth. He just felt like he would lose something important if he gave in here, so just wiped the food off, shrugged away the torture, and stared defiantly at the bubble people. And they did not like it one bit. The torment lasted for almost the entire week, by the end of which the bubble people were pissed off at him. They called in the slavers and ordered a few things which Luffy could barely hear as his ears were bleeding because of the multiple needles stuck inside them. The next thing he knew, he was being treated by a few doctors, and the slavers actually looked at his body with pity. A couple days later, he was told that the bubble women had bought him and he was going to be their property from then on. Luffy didn't know who the bubble people were, but understood that if he was sold to them, the rest of his life was going to be hell. He understood that the only reason he was being treated and kept alive was because the bubble people wanted to break him. Unfortunately, during that time when he was being treated was also the time that the slavers got a hold of his weakness. One of the doctors who was treating Luffy ended up talking to him like he was a person, and Luffy, being Luffy, had quickly befriended her. Her name was Kel, and she was the first person in months that had talked to him like he was a human being, and Luffy, who had been starved for such contact, had happily started talking to her. It was just 2 days, but the doctor was laughing with him as he joked around even in such a messed up situation. When one of the slavers saw the scene of Luffy cracking a joke and the doctor laughing at his joke, that doctor's fate was sealed. A day later, when his injuries were not even healed properly, he was brought in a room with a furnace. The bubble woman and her supposed daughter were there along with a few slavers, a couple of whom were standing near the furnace with heated iron rods. Luffy instantly realized he was going to be branded, and much to his horror, he wasn't the only one. Kel, the one person who had showed him kindness, was also in the room, on her knees and severely beaten up. Luffy raged as he saw that someone who had just kindly talked to him was now in chains because of him, and the slavers finally saw him break. He struggled against all the men holding him as he screamed in anger when he saw that the slavers were torturing Kel and heard her gut-wrenching screams. He was being held down by multiple people, so he couldn't do much. He and Kel were made to kneel side by side while Luffy continued to struggle with all he had to break free, as 2 guys with heated brands came closer to them while laughing. The brand was a circular symbol with some triangles sticking out at the sides, and judging by what the slavers had told him, it was the mark of the bubble people. Luffy kept struggling as the 2 guys brought a heated brand close to him and Kel. He saw the bubble woman standing a bit to the side laughing at him and Kel, then looked behind him to see the red-hot iron rod, looked at the malicious grin of the guy holding it, heard all the laughing and taunting from the other slavers, then saw the pitiful state of Kel, the one person who had treated him like a human, who was now sobbing in agony. And his mind raged in frustration, defiance, powerlessness, fury, and finally, he just snapped. He felt something, a power he had never felt before, burst from within him and get unleashed on his surroundings. He didn't really understand what it was, but he instinctively knew it was something powerful, so he just dug deeper and unleashed more of whatever it was that was being released. It was a mysterious force that he felt coursing through his body. No, not his body, but his spirit almost. He didn't understand what was happening, but a couple seconds later, the room he was in erupted in chaos. He looked around in confusion and saw people foaming at the mouth and keeling over for no apparent reason. Before he could make sense of why people were falling unconscious, he felt the searing pain of hot iron being dragged across his back. He looked back and found the guy who was about to brand him had also fainted. But while fainting, he had ended up dragging the brand across his back instead of just pressing it. He looked to his side and saw that Kel had also fainted, but luckily the guy who was going to brand her was far enough that it didn't reach her. He didn't have time to think as the bubble woman and child screamed, falling over too, and the soldiers behind them caught the two before they could hit the ground. Luffy looked around the room and found that more than half of the people had fainted for some reason. He didn't understand what was happening, but he saw his chance to escape. He grabbed Kel and dashed to the door in all the chaos as the ones who were still conscious were trying to look around for the enemy that had seemingly made half the people in the room collapse. Luffy burst out of the room while carrying Kel and started running in a random direction as he had no idea how the place was structured. He tried to wake Kel up, but she had fallen unconscious too. Whatever power had affected the slavers in the room had also affected her apparently. Seeing no help from the doctor, he went to the first cage he saw and banged on it trying to get the person's attention, but he was unresponsive. He went around to the other cages too, but no one gave him a response other than a simple, uninterested glance. He yelled at them in frustration, but no one responded. The other slavers were quickly alerted and thus began the chase. Luffy ran around causing chaos in the underground space with slavers chasing after him. He looked for a kitchen or any place where he could find food to fill his stomach first and get his energy back, but couldn't find any place where they kept food. He kept asking the people in the cages for help, but not one person did anything more than spare him a glance. Luffy had been starved for months with only morsels of food thrown at him now and then, so he had no energy to fight an entire slave base. He was already in a very weakened state because of sea stone, torture, and starvation, so couldn't keep running for long. And with the burden of carrying another person, he couldn't put up much of a fight and was soon caught. A bunch of nets made of sea stone were thrown on him, and his first escape attempt failed. For some reason though, the slavers had been trying to capture him and made damn sure not to kill him, which confused Luffy. He and Kel were brought to a room where all the slavers had also gathered, and Luffy thought they were going to continue the branding, but he could see that the slavers themselves were insanely terrified for some reason Luffy didn't understand. They were apparently waiting for the bubble woman to regain consciousness in another room. A few hours later, where the slavers had looked like they were waiting for a death verdict, one of the soldiers guarding the bubble woman walked in the room and told them that their master, the bubble woman, had lost interest in doing business with the slavers and as a result, lost interest in buying Luffy too. He then proceeded to kill a few of the slavers, who Luffy later learned were the leaders of the slaver group, while the rest stayed still not doing anything, which baffled Luffy. The soldier killed pretty much all the slavers who were in the room during the branding and a few more, and then just left. Luffy later learned that the leaders were all killed because they had let the bubble woman get hurt while in their facility. Kel hadn't woken up even after the bubble woman and their soldiers went away, and she was separated from him and taken somewhere. Luffy, on the other hand, was enslaved again and put in a solitary cage, and the slavers that were still left alive were extremely pissed off at him for causing their leaders to be killed. They didn't really know who had caused the people in the room to faint, but since it had happened during his branding, they all blamed Luffy. So, instead of killing him like the bubble woman had apparently ordered, they hid him, deciding to make him an example and prolong his torture for as long as possible before killing him. From then on, his torture was tripled and was also done in front of an audience. He would be dragged in the middle of the other cages and tortured in front of the other slaves to serve as an example to what happens to disobedient slaves. This was a boon to Luffy though, as he wasn't in solitary confinement anymore and could see more people, no matter how uncooperative they were. Luffy also saw that Kel was now in a cage too, battered and bruised with a hollow look in her eyes. He had caught her eyes a few times, but she always averted her gaze, seemingly not wanting to acknowledge him. He realized she was probably mad at him as he was the reason she was made a slave in the first place, and felt extremely guilty. 2 weeks later, Luffy led his second escape attempt, this time more successful than the last time, but this too had ultimately failed. He had freed a lot of slaves including Kel, and it was a glorious escape attempt in which a lot of slavers had lost their lives. Luffy had managed to help Kel and a few others escape, but unfortunately, he himself wasn't able to escape successfully, and that seemed to be the last straw as the remaining slavers who were still alive gave up on breaking Luffy. Even with the increased torture, not once had he obeyed them, so they didn't think he was ever going to break, so decided it was time to kill him. They also didn't want to see him do something like what he did during the second escape attempt again. So, they lethally poisoned him and threw him into a death pit with other slaves. He was told that he wouldn't be able to move his body because of the poison and it would slowly kill him over several days. They wanted him to die a slow, agonizing death for all the trouble he had caused them, and they made sure to let Luffy know that. And so, that's how Luffy had ended up in the impromptu graveyard of slaves. He didn't see Kel nor the other slaves he had broken out during his second escape attempt again, but he was sure they had escaped, so hoped they were safe somewhere. Luffy stared at the sky full of stars, reminiscing the past few months, and it was finally settling in that no one could help him anymore and he would die here. He couldn't believe that he would die before even starting his journey, before he even had a chance to chase his dream. Let's live without regrets. He apologized to Ace because he had broken that promise as he regretted his current situation. I'll gather an amazing crew better than yours. He darted his eyes to his side where his greatest treasure, his straw hat, was sitting right next to him, covered in smears of blood. When Luffy had woken up the first time in a cage, he only had his clothes and his hat on him. In a moment of clarity, he had realized that he couldn't let the slavers know that he had anything precious on him. The only reason he could oppose them as much as he did was because he had nothing to lose except his life. If he let it slip that his hat was his greatest treasure and was precious to him, they would obviously use it against him. So, he had never once said anything about his hat and acted casual about it, and looked like they just threw his hat away with him too. And I'll become the Pirate King. He stared at the hat and apologized to Shanks that he couldn't keep his promise of returning his hat to him after becoming a great pirate. It's my treasure tab. I'll pay my tab with all the treasure I get when I become the Pirate King. I'll never do the chores. The Pirate King doesn't do chores. He remembered all the others who mattered to him: Makino, Daten, Dogra, Mogra, and the other bandits, Gramps, Sabo. He apologized to each one of them for unfulfilled promises. Luffy kept staring at the star-studded sky as he felt his life slipping away. His eyes slowly closed as his time ran out, and the man who would have become the Pirate King, the man who would have become the freest man ever, the man who would have flipped the world upside down, the man who would have become the most influential figure in history, the man who would have saved many lives and inspired generations of dreamers, the man who would have brought hope into the lives of millions, the man who would have been the ray of sunshine in this dark, fucked-up world. Died. Luffy slowly opened his eyes and laid his eyes on what looked like faint purplish clouds. He sat up, looking around in confusion, and found that he was in a void of blackness with purple streams of clouds all around the vast void in a chaotic manner. He also found that he was also sitting on massive purple cloud, and when he touched it, it almost evaporated in his hands. It took a moment for him to realize that he had just been lying in an impromptu graveyard of dead people where he was also dying, but suddenly he somehow found himself in this space. He looked down at himself and saw he was dressed in his signature red vest and blue jeans with his hat also on his head. His clothes that had torn off long ago were now somehow perfectly fine. So, he was dressed in his favorite clothes in a seemingly purplish black void with no memory of ever getting there. "Hello," he yelled, hoping to catch anyone's attention. And thankfully, he got a response. "Ugh, where the hell am I?" He heard someone groaning from behind him. Luffy quickly turned around and saw the back of another person. It was a man wearing a red hoodie and was sitting down with his back to him. He saw the man looking around in confusion too, and so called out again, "Hey." The man turned around and Luffy studied him with interest. He had black curly hair, dark round eyes, slightly angular face with a small scar running down his chin. He was wearing a red hoodie with the word freedom emblazoned across it and black jeans. The man also studied him carefully as Luffy studied him, and he too wore a confused look on his face. Hi, where am I?" the man muttered after a couple of seconds. "No idea. Just woke up here." "Me too. Can't see anyone else other than the two of us here." He trailed off, staring at Luffy intensely. Luffy tilted his head in confusion at his stare. "What's wrong?" Still staring at him intensely. His lips curled up into a smile as he smirked and said, "Hey, you look a lot like Luffy." "Oh, you know me." "What?" The man blinked in bewilderment. Luffy again tilted his head in confusion. The man apparently knew him somehow, but he had never seen him in his life. "You just said my name. I am Luffy. How do you know me?" The man just stared at him, not saying anything, as if he had been given some life-altering news, which only further confused Luffy. "Who are you?" Luffy asked after a few seconds of getting no response from the stranger. On reflex, the man said, "Oh, I'm Leo. Wait, that's not important. You said you're Luffy and you look like him too." I'm not dreaming. I already pinched myself." He said the last part to himself with a contemplative look on his face. Luffy frowned, not understanding this man called Leo, and decided to change the topic. "So, any idea where we are?" No idea. Last thing I remember is being in a motorcycle accident and slowly bleeding to death with my limbs cut off." He trailed off but then shrugged. "So random guess. I'm in a vegetative state and my mind is making this up." "Ooh, I was dying too." "And what's vegetable state? And what do you mean by your mind making this up?" Is this like Yuta's power?" "Wow, great going." My mind, Leo chuckled. "You are so Luffy-like." "And what do you mean by Yuta's power?" "What's her power?" Luffy decided to ignore his beginning rambling and answered his question. "Yuta said that her mind can make up worlds when she sings." "Make up worlds? The hell does that mean?" "No idea, but I've been in her world before. She could fly and make amazing tasty food." The movie isn't released yet, so I don't know her powers. "So, my mind is making up random stuff?" Leo questioned with a pondering look. Luffy frowned, not understanding what he was rambling about. "You're confusing." Hey, I'm just as surprised as you by all this. Well, how do you know me? Why wouldn't I know you? I've been watching you for over a decade now. I fucking love One Piece and love you as a character. We're kinda similar, you know, so I guess I just click a lot with you. If I lived in a world such as yours, I'm pretty sure I would set out to be a pirate king too, Leo said happily. Luffy didn't understand most of his words, but he concentrated on the I love One Piece part. Wait, you love the One Piece? That means you found it already. Doesn't that mean you're already the pirate king? No, wait. I don't know what the One Piece is exactly, although there are lots of theories. Leo trailed off contemplatively with a hand on his chin. Luffy was even more confused now. Leo was making no sense. His face scrunched up as he crossed his arms and attempted to process what Leo was saying. He loves the One Piece, but doesn't know what it is. We're similar. He wants to be Pirate King too. Damn, another rival. But he knows me from somewhere. He's been watching me over for a decade. How does he know me? Did I meet him somewhere? Thankfully, before steam could start rising out of his head from thinking too much, another voice popped up. Oh, what's this? Came a very excited voice from seemingly nowhere. Leo and Luffy started looking around to see where the voice was coming from but couldn't find anyone. Suddenly, streams of white light came out of seemingly nothing and coalesced into a white humanoid body. The new person, if it could even be called that, had no physical or facial features except for a thin line where his mouth was supposed to be. Whoa, a ghost! Luffy exclaimed with excitement. Ooh, truth from Full Metal Alchemist. Leo grinned wide. Wow, my mind sure is a great place. But why truth though? I want Winry or Edward to show up. Luffy went silent, not knowing what the heck Leo was talking about, but since he seemed to recognize the figure, he waited to see what the ghost was going to say. Meanwhile, the white figure just studied Leo and Luffy for a few moments before gasping, "Ooh, I know what's happening. It's the same soul resonance effect." The what? Luffy and Leo asked. Same soul resonance. Very rare, but it happens once in a billion years or so. Still seeing the blank look on Leo and Luffy's faces, the white figure continued. It happens when the same soul dies in two different universes at around the same meridian at the same point in time while on the same axis. There was a brief silence as the two didn't understand anything the white figure said. So what you're saying is, we're not in my mind? Leo finally asked, breaking the silence. No, we're not. Who are you then? You look like truth. Don't know what you mean by truth, but I'm just a being living in a higher dimension compared to yours. Just call me white. I was just passing by when I felt a strange vibration from this direction, so decided to check it out. And I found you two trapped here. I don't get anything. Luffy whined, completely lost on what the ghost was saying, and gave up on figuring out what was happening. He just waited to see if Leo or White would explain it in simpler terms. Leo, on the other hand, seemed to understand at least a bit of what White had said, as he looked like he was thinking, and after a while, finally said, okay, a few questions. First, you're a being from a higher dimension? How does that? Whoa. You know what? I'm sure whatever you say will go right over my head. Smart, White said, giving a thumbs up. Leo then pointed at himself and Luffy. Okay, so you're telling me that we're both souls from different universes who are dead. Almost dead. You're just outside the soul plane. Soul plane is where souls from every universe go after they die. Both of your souls were ascending to the soul plane at the same time and axis. So your souls resonated with one another and kinda trapped you in this buffer space just outside the soul plane. It's just a temporary phenomenon, so no need to worry. The resonance effect will pass in a few hours and you'll ascend to the soul plane completely and truly die. I see. Leo nodded his head sagely. So we are in fact dead. And also we're both also from different universes, huh? Yep. So this is like the afterlife? Luffy asked. Pretty much, yeah. And we're from different universes? Luffy asked, confused. Different world. Different reality. Leo offered, hoping he could understand that. So, like an alert reality. Alternate reality, yes, Leo said, sweat dropping. Wow, that's so cool. Sabo told me about such a story once. Luffy exclaimed with shining eyes. Leo looked at Luffy with amusement before pointing at him and turning to White. So why is Luffy here? He's dead too, obviously, White stated simply. No, I mean, why is Luffy, the fictional character, here? Hey, I'm not fictional, Luffy protested. Fictional? White looked confused before he went up to Leo and touched his forehead. He gave a yelp of surprise, then immediately went to Luffy and touched his forehead too before he started laughing maniacally. PFFTTT. Oh boy, this is amazing. Leo and Luffy just sat there staring at the cackling humanoid madman. Then looked at each other, shrugged, conveying that they had no idea why he was laughing, and then focused their gazes back on White. After a full minute, White finally composed himself. Explain. Now, Leo demanded. Okay, PFFT. Now that I got that out of my system, let me explain. You guys are both from vastly different worlds with different world histories, physical rules, and much more. As a small and simple example, in your world, White pointed to Leo, the landmass split into 7 and formed the 7 continents you know of, then pointing at Luffy he continued. While in your world, the landmass just formed a sort of ring around the world and formed the red line. He then pointed to both of them, but you're both essentially the same souls. How can we both be the same? Luffy asked. He barely understood any of his words, so concentrated on things he could understand. Every soul has to be born in every iteration of the universe. Yours just happened to be born in a world where the red line, grand line, and devil fruits exist. And Leo just happened to be born in a world with 7 continents. The technology is mass-produced and the world is connected. But essentially, you are the same soul, just born in different worlds. If that's still too hard to understand, just imagine 2 worlds, one in which you love meat and the other in which you love tangerines, but everything else is the same. Both versions of you die and come here, and the only difference in your lives would be your favorite food. That's easier to imagine as you guys being the same soul, right? Now imagine the same thing, but with instead of just a single difference in your lives, your whole lives are different with the land masses, world history, ancestry, parents, and a lot of others things being so different to the point where you're even named differently. But you're still the same soul. I see. So multiverse theory is real, huh? And also every piece of fiction ever written is real somewhere out there, huh? Leo breathed in awe and a bit of horror thinking about some of the messed up stuff he had read. Not every piece of fiction. I saw some stories in your world from your memories that are pretty out there which make no sense. Like for example, there are some characters in some comics which are the personifications of death, time, universe. That's just inaccurate in any sense of reality. Plus entropy also plays a role. In Leo's world, devil fruits just aren't possible because the world is stabler and physics isn't that mal. But in Luffy's world, physics is relatively more loose, thus making stuff like devil fruits and haki possible. Leo nodded sagely at that. Some stories introduce God too, so such stories couldn't possibly exist. So, I'm Luffy in another universe, huh? Leo trailed off staring at Luffy in awe. And this guy is the Luffy. Wow, Luffy of course still didn't understand. I still don't get it. If I understood correctly, you're saying we're both from different worlds, right? But then, why do you know me? If we're in different worlds, you shouldn't know me. And why do you keep calling me fictional? He asked with a puzzled look on his face. He clearly hadn't understood a majority of the things that were said, and had just latched onto simple concepts like they were from different worlds. Leo chuckled at that. Because in my world, there's a comic book called One Piece where the main protagonist Monkey D. Luffy sets out to sea to achieve his dream of becoming the Pirate King. Leo declared reverentially. I was an avid fan and watched your journey up till Wano. Luffy's eyes widened with shock as he gaped at Leo with disbelief. White hastily added, and that's the funny part here. This same soul resonance has happened before for others, but they were in fairly similar worlds or some in widely different worlds too. But I have never seen or even heard of a situation where one person's world is a fictional story in the other. I'm a comic book character. Wow, so cool. Luffy exclaimed excitedly with shining eyes, but did a complete 180 a second later as his face scrunched up in confusion. But wait, I didn't even set out yet. So, how come you saw my journey? I died before I reached 17. What? Leo yelled shocked. How old are you right now? How did you die? I'm 15. Some mean guys kidnapped me and kept me locked up for a long time. They beat me up every day and tried to make me a slave. I obviously didn't listen to a single thing they said. And a couple days ago, they just fed me some poison and threw me out in a pit, where I died. There are multiple iterations of your world, White explained. Multiverse theory, remember. In some other world, that world's Luffy already set out and had all the adventures that is described in the comic book from Leo's world. In your specific world, you died before you even started your journey. No fair, Luffy whined with a pout. Leo, on the other hand, was having a mental breakdown. Oh no, your world is doomed. So many people die because you're not there. He teared up thinking about all the people Luffy helps throughout his journey and buried his face in his hands. Oh God, what will happen to Nami, Robin, Rook, all the countries you save? Oh God, oh no. Seeing Leo tearing up, Luffy got alarmed and also curious about his supposed journey. What happens? Leo, with tears running down his face, began you affect and save so many lives, you know. First off, all your crewmates. They didn't have such good lives before you dropped in. You saved them one by one, bringing hope into their lives. Leo started remembering most of the crew's backstories and felt even more sad. After taking a moment to calm himself, he continued, and that's just your crew. You go on to save so many countries and the people you befriended along the way. And oh God, Ace and Sabo. They both would be devastated. Luffy was feeling extremely bad now. He apparently would have ended up making a lot of friends, and they are in trouble judging by what Leo said. He felt guilt rising up in his chest as he had let them all down. Ace and Sabo would be sad too. In Sabo, Wait, Sabo. He's already dead. Why would he be devastated? Oh no, Sabo's still alive. You'll find out what I've found out in the future. He has lost his memories, so that's why he hadn't contacted you guys yet. He would have come to meet you after he gets his memories back because of Ace's death. Leo stopped himself before he went further, realizing what he was about to say. He doesn't know his crew in the future yet, so it shouldn't affect him that much, but he knows Ace. If he realized Ace dies, then he would lose it. Let's not burden him with such knowledge just before he dies. Thankfully, Luffy was still caught on the fact that Sabo was alive to realize Leo's slip-up. That's great. Now, Ace won't be all alone. He still has Sabo, still thinking about others, uncaring of his own death. Leo thought with a small smile. Tell me more. Luffy excitedly perked up after some time. I'm not gonna lie it, but I still want to know my adventure. White clapped his hands, getting both their attention. If you want to, you can just share your memories. Just touch each other's forehead and the memories will flow to the other person. Luffy was curious about this other world and the supposed comic book about his own life story, so he was up for it and nodded, instantly looking excitedly at Leo. But Leo was a bit hesitant. He didn't want to burden Luffy with knowing about all the lives depending on him in his last moments, as he would obviously feel extremely guilty for letting them all down, and Ace's death was also a factor. Seeing his hesitant look, White spoke up. It's his life. He has the right to know. But if you're thinking that I would feel guilty because I let down all my crew and all the people I save, then you're right. But I don't care. It's my responsibility, and I did let them down. At least let me know who they are. Leo looked stunned at Luffy before his lips curled up into a smile. Damn, idiot is so perceptive when it comes to people. He thought about it for a second more, and looking at Luffy, who gave him a serious, reassuring smile, he sighed and agreed to it, albeit a bit reluctantly. They both moved forwards and brought their foreheads together. A yellow spark of electricity passed at the point of contact as all memories of each person flowed into the other, and they slumped down the next second. Each of them experienced the other's complete life in that single instant. Even though Leo already knew of Luffy's childhood from the story, it was an entirely different experience of feeling and living it. He felt the fear when Garp threw him in a tiger's den, or tied him up to weather balloons, or threw him in ravines. He felt the loneliness of his life before Shanks, the joy of being around Shanks and Yuta, the pain when Yuta didn't show up and he thought she died, the hopelessness he felt when Shanks lost his arm because of him, his resolve of being the greatest pirate, the loneliness after Shanks left, joy of meeting Ace and Sabo. Leo felt every punch Porkami gave Luffy with the spiked gloves, and experienced the thoughts that went through his mind, where he kept thinking that Ace and Sabo would never become his friends if he spoke. He felt the joy when the two finally accepted him, all the sparring and playing around, declaring their dreams on top of the cliff, becoming brothers by exchanging sake cups. He felt the burning heat from the gray terminal fire, and the despair of knowing Ace was lost somewhere in there. He felt the pain of losing Sabo. He lived and experienced the rest of his life, conversations that were never shown, stories that were never told, experiences that were never mentioned. So many things had happened in Luffy's life on Dawn that was never shown, and Leo got an entirely new understanding of Luffy. He saw his growth from being a crybaby to his current self and was awed by it. Luffy was a very unique individual whose thought processes was very different from what Leo himself knew, and experiencing all of Luffy's thoughts and views on many matters gave him a deeper understanding of how Luffy worked. Leo also experienced all the training Luffy put himself through, and Leo could also now do everything Luffy could do. His physical strength wouldn't change, obviously, but techniques, battle tactics, and mental discipline was all now integrated into Leo, and he truly realized that Luffy was a genius in battle. And when he experienced what Luffy experienced when the slavers had caught him and tortured him endlessly for months, he lost it and started screaming and tearing up in pain, rage, and sadness. Luffy was awed by Leo's life. His world was very different, and seeing Leo's perspective and growth as he went through his life was a fantastic experience for Luffy. Leo was an orphan who grew up in an orphanage until he was 18, when he finally got his own job and a place to live in. Leo had to grow up very quick, as he had no one to depend on for monetary matters nor take care of him. Luffy had never really thought much of money, as he just stole it, but in Leo's life, it was everything. His world also had compulsory education, so Luffy also experienced school life and learned all the things he had never gotten a chance to learn in his own life. Math and science, which Luffy never understood other than the basic elementary stuff, he could now understand because Leo understood it. He learned the history and geography of their world, marveled by how they already had a world map using satellites and were even mapping the universe. The everyday technology which connected a majority of the world fascinated Luffy. The internet and smartphones were mind-boggling inventions that gobsmacked Luffy. All those functions in that tiny device with all the information in the world. access to tons of content from news to entertainment, movies, shows, video calling, social media apps, forums, chat rooms, music videos, comedy skits, science experiments, cat videos. Too many things across various topics to experience, and pretty much anyone in Leo's world could access all that. And all the internet and meme culture was amazing to Luffy. In Leo's personal life, he was a born leader. Even when he was as young as 9 years old, he would take charge to take care of the younger kids in his orphanage. He was active in school activities, taking charge in organizing events, and also a people person. He made lots and lots of friends, helping them out any chance he got. He also read a lot. Be it fiction, non-fiction, fantasy, politics, science, or philosophy, Leo dabbled in a wide variety of genres. Luffy never had any interest in reading because it seemed boring. But experiencing reading through Leo's memories gave Luffy an entirely new perspective. And then there were the tons of TV shows and movies Leo watched. The amount of entertainment in his world was baffling, as nothing like that was ever present in Luffy's world. At least not on Dawn Island. And Leo loved watching all sorts of shows, movies, and anime. All the different lore and concepts of different fictional worlds amazed Luffy. It was like going on an adventure in different worlds, which he absolutely loved. One of the other things that Luffy absolutely loved about Leo's life was that he was a musician. Leo could play the piano and guitar very well and was very interested in music. He participated in school and local musical competitions and even won a few times. He went on to do masters in music in college too. He minored in human psychology as he was interested in that too, but he had mainly wanted to make a career in music. He had planned to join a music firm to make soundtracks for different movies, shows, and eventually become a music coordinator, but unfortunately had died before he could do anything serious. Then came Leo's dating life. Luffy never really paid any romantic attention to girls and didn't even really understand what sex was. But going through Leo's dating life was an interesting experience, to say the least. Leo dated a few girls before finding the love of his life, Serena. She was a classmate at school, and they had started off as friends, which had soon evolved into something more. And Luffy experienced falling in love through Leo's memories, which was extremely weird. They dated for 3 years from when Leo was 17 to 20, and the two had a fantastic relationship. But then tragedy struck as Serena died, and that started Leo's destructive years, which Luffy absolutely hated to experience. Leo was lost and depressed after she died, and he had spiraled into drugs, alcohol, sex, and just didn't care much about life anymore. Experiencing all those dark feelings and moments during this part of Leo's life made Luffy uncomfortable, angry, sad, sympathetic, and he experienced loneliness again. He lost most of his friends, and it was a horrible time in his life. And Luffy experienced everything as if it was his own life. Thankfully, Leo was able to come out of his destructive spiral after 18 months and chose to be better. He reformed himself, got clean, started paying more attention to his education and career, and was doing a very good job. Sadly, a year after he changed his life for the better, at age 22, he died in a motorcycle accident. And the main thing that had initiated this whole thing, the comic book and anime about his own life. Seeing himself in a comic book was surreal, to say the least. Seeing himself animated on TV was even more surreal. One Piece was Leo's favorite, so he read the manga, watched the anime, laughed his ass off at the funny bits, bawled his eyes out at the sad bits, got angry at specific characters for good justifiable reason. Fuck you, spandom. Went on forums to discuss the story, theorized what happens next, argued with people who just didn't get the story, bought merch. Leo was obsessed with One Piece, and he loved Luffy. And loving himself as if he was a different person was the strangest experience ever. Luffy saw his own would have been adventure in the form of a comic book and an anime with awe, reacting to it like it was just a fictional story. It wasn't finished yet, as when Leo died, the manga was still ongoing. The latest chapter showed Luffy facing off against Kaido and Wano, and he had unlocked Gear 5. As he went through his own adventure from Alvida's ship to Wano, Luffy felt extreme levels of guilt building up in his chest. He now understood what Leo meant by him affecting and saving so many lives, and he cursed himself for letting them all down. His world was fucked up, to say the least, and he now understood so many things and knew of so many secrets of the world, and so many mysteries too. He thought he understood that the world was much more crueler when he was being tortured, but seeing all the things that happened in the story gave him a much better understanding of his own world. Living an entire person's life in an instant had left Luffy staring off into space in a daze as he processed all the memories, while it had left Leo also in a similar daze before the memories of the enslavement got processed and he got reduced to a writhing and angry mess. Hello, those fucking celestial dragons. I want to fucking eviscerate them. Leo roared, panting hard, bringing Luffy back to his senses, and finally see Leo trembling and suffering in pain. Are you okay? Luffy worriedly asked, making him sit up and trying to calm him down. Yeah, not much of a fighter in my world, you know. So all that horrible training you put yourself through, your grandpa put you through, and then the enslavement. The memories of pain erupted all at once all over my body. It just made me lose my mind a bit. That's all. Shishishishi, yeah. All you did was watch and read stuff. The most you did was walk in terms of physical activities. Hey, my world didn't require me to be strong. I could get by on my brain alone. You didn't even travel anywhere. All you did was stay in a couple of cities. Luffy whined. I wanted to see Europe and Japan and all those amazing places you saw on videos, but you never traveled anywhere. Hey, I couldn't afford to go on adventures as I wished. People need money where I'm from. Not like I can steal from the Grey Terminal, or raid other evil pirates for money, or just find a city of gold. Tashishi, yeah, your world sucks in that. Leo just shrugged, agreeing with that statement, but then suddenly realizing something. Looked at Luffy with a horrified expression. Please tell me you didn't get the memories of my entire life. Yep, experienced everything. Oh no, Leo breathed in horror, burying his head in his arms. Shishi, it's okay. You watched porn, so what? Oh god, no. And had a lot of sex with a lot of girls. So much drugs too. Oh god's nuo. Leo grumbled with a blushing red face, having all his embarrassing moments laid bare in front of Luffy. Luffy was like a hero to him, and showing him all his embarrassing, weak and dark moments was definitely mortifying as hell. Man, so much see. Ugh, please stop talking. Leo shut Luffy up by covering his mouth. He then angrily turned on White. You asshole. Why the hell didn't you tell me all my memories would get transferred? I only wanted to show him stuff about the story. You never asked. White whistled innocently. Shishishishi, you bastard. Don't laugh. I got your memories too, you know. I know all your embarrassing moments too. Like how you asked Daden why your D got hard in the mornings. Luffy gasped, turning a bit red as he now understood just how embarrassing a situation that actually was. And let's not forget the talk Ace gave you. Man, Ace sure was blushing and struggling to give you the birds and the bees. He was being so awkward, and you were so stupid that you didn't even understand anything and kept asking stupid questions, making him more flustered. Man, poor Ace. Luffy went even more red, and before he could rebuke, Leo continued. And then the next day, you started staring at those girls in Goa. Luffy finally lost it and began defending himself. I just stared unconsciously because I was curious about what Ace had talked about. That's all. But you did stare. GRR. What about you, huh? You and Serena did so much freaky stuff with each other. And after she was gone, you spiraled into even more with so many other girls. Hey, don't bring up a man's destructive years. I agree, I went off the rails then. Oh yeah, sorry, you're right. I won't bring up those 18 months of your destructive spiral, Luffy said with pity before he started arguing again. But what about before, huh? You and Serena had a sinful amount of sex. Well, at least I did have sex, you virgin idiot. I'm just 15. Even you lost your virginity at 16. Well, not like you were gonna lose it anytime soon either. GRR. I had a damn good reason. Yeah. Leo suddenly calmed down and looked contemplatively at Luffy. Well, going by your past, you choose not to romantically think of girls, huh? Judging by how you didn't even bat an eye at Hancock, the logical conclusion was that you were asexual, but you had a very valid and complex reason as to why you never bothered with romance or girls, huh? Luffy also calmed down. Yeah. Wonder why Oda never included that tidbit from my childhood in the story. He did say he won't show any romance in the story. But who cares? Now that you understand how sex really works, would you have broken the promise you made to yourself to never think of girls romantically? What do you think? Of course not. Yeah, now that I know about Rouge too, there is no way I'm ever breaking that promise I made to myself. Yeah, makes sense, and choosing not to think of girls romantically is as easy as pie for you. Which is also unique. Leo trailed off, staring at Luffy. You are way more complex than you let on, you know. Sure, you don't understand complex things like science and stuff, but that's just knowledge. Wisdom-wise, you're really smart, and you experience self-doubt and fear just like any other person. But just never let it show. The manga didn't really delve into inner monologues, so you always seem like this fearless, infallible captain who can do anything. But you're just like everyone else. A very special and unique way of thinking with a lot of optimism, sure, but you're still human. Luffy rubbed his head sheepishly. Yeah, well, if the story me was anything like me, he couldn't allow himself to show weakness. I'm the captain, so it's my job to reassure my crew and be a rock they can lean on. If I showed fear and doubt, I can never be a captain. I have to constantly keep the crew happy too. Leo smiled, nodding and agreeing with him. As I said, you're stupid in knowledge, sure, but you are a people person. Yeah, and the fight with Usopp was something I had never imagined happening with one of my crewmates. Luffy said with sadness laced in his voice. I always thought the crew I made would never fight among themselves seriously. Guess I broke and matured a bit then, huh? Yeah, that was heartbreaking to watch. I can't even imagine your emotions during that time. Yeah, well, now I'll never know. Luffy trailed off sadly, deciding that moping like this wasn't going to do anything. Leo quickly changed the topic. It was surreal to actually live your life, you know, Leo began. Gramps sure didn't hold back while training you, and the fist of love actually hurts a lot. Oh yeah, it hurts so much, Luffy whined, rubbing his head unconsciously. He also thought that crying about the current situation wasn't going to help anyone, so just decided to chat more. And your dream? Leo exclaimed with a broad, excited smile. It's amazing. Why was that even a secret in the first place? Thematically, it makes for an amazing reveal. I can only imagine the panel Oda would have written your dream with. I'm sure it would have been glorious. Shishishishi, yeah. Also, Yuta. She's the one who kinda inspired you to even think about a dream, huh? Yeah, I got the idea of creating a new Genesis from her. I wanted to do something like that too, and I came up with that dream. Roger also had the same dream, huh? That's surreal. Yep. And her power. She can sing and pull your soul into her world while your real body is asleep, huh? That's one insane power. Yeah, but why is she just a movie character? She's very important to my childhood and she isn't even canon. Luffy asked with a frown. I think Oda mentioned that she is canon and the events that happened in your childhood is canon, but the movie itself would be non-canon, so she wouldn't have ever shown up in front of me in the future. Nagari is real. White suddenly popped up in between them, startling both as they had forgotten he was even here. Wow, White. Sorry, I had forgotten you were here, Leo apologized sheepishly. Yeah, sorry, White. We were just too lost in each other's memories. It's fine, White waved it off dismissively. So what do you mean Nagari is real? Leo asked. Nagari was a filler anime character, right? Oh yeah, both exclaimed in unison. Nagari was the old man the ASL brothers had met in Gray's terminal who had trained them for a while. But he was an anime-only character, so basically filler. But in Luffy's reality, he had actually met Nagari, so that might mean the other fillers could have been real too. So fillers are real too, like Appies and the dragon. Rainbow Mist. They don't make sense in the context of the world though. Dragons in East Blue, and a space-time loop. They just don't make sense. Yeah, I don't know about dragons in East Blue, but Rainbow Mist is probably not real, White replied with a hand on his chin. What? You don't know? Shouldn't you be an omnipotent being? Luffy asked. I'm a higher dimensional being. I'm not a god. There are trillions of universes out there, so of course I'm not gonna bother learning about all of them. Do you learn everything about every single cell in your body? No, right. It's the same for me. The only things I know about your world is what I saw from both your memories just now. Oh, I see. Makes sense. Leo and Luffy both nodded sagely. So what does fillers have to do with Yuta showing up or not? Luffy asked, getting back to the main topic. Just saying that the manga doesn't represent your world. Fillers don't have any effect on the manga story, but if the fillers are real, then they will definitely have an effect on the rest of the story. So, manga isn't canon in your reality. Oh, I see. Luffy nodded sagely. So movies and fillers would have all happened too in one way or another, and what happens in the manga wouldn't necessarily have happened the way they did either. Yep. Damn, Luffy now understands things, huh? Just a few minutes ago, you were calling alternate reality as alter real TPFFHAHA. Jerk. Luffy yelled, dope slapping him. Leo kept up his mischievous grin and continued. You know, the more time I get to go through your memories, the more they're feeling like my memories. Luffy nodded, agreeing with him. Yeah, me too. It's feeling more and more like my memories now. Exactly. So Leo drawled mischievously, if you think about it. You just lost your virginity. Luffy went beet red and lunged at Leo, intent of beating him up. Already expecting it, Leo jumped out of the way and started running around trying to escape his punches. Luffy in turn chased him. All the while Leo cackled with laughter and Luffy used a few choice words from Leo's world. This went on for a few minutes until White cleared his throat, and only then did Leo and Luffy stop. They had again forgotten about White, lost in their own world. They both apologized sheepishly and sat down again. So how you holding up? Leo asked cautiously. He nor Luffy wanted to talk about this, but they just couldn't not acknowledge it. All the missed adventures and friends. And and Ace. It's a lot to take in. Luffy let out a deep heavy sigh. What's going to happen to all of them now? They'll all either die or face a fate worse than death. And Ace, I don't know. If I wasn't dead or hadn't gotten all your memories too, I think I would have gone catatonic like I did in the story. Trying to lighten the mood, Leo smirked, remarking, wow, you used the word catatonic. Using big words now, huh? Guess losing your virginity in someone else's memories makes you a man now, huh? Luffy just dope slapped him again. Memories are what makes a person's personality, White said sagely. Since you basically lived another life, your personality would have undergone a change too. Luffy and Leo nodded at that, completely agreeing with him. Yeah, I definitely feel like I would take more risks if I went back to my world and not worry so much about things I can't control. And definitely travel more even without money and see where I end up. Also join a fight club or something, Leo said with a smile. I just got crammed with so much knowledge about math, science, psychology, and thankfully music. I think I can now play the instruments you could. And so much movie, shows, and anime knowledge, including my world's knowledge. And let's not forget the internet culture. I'm itching to make an obscure reference or a meme joke, Luffy said, chuckling. But I also feel I've matured a lot since you were mature for your age. I wouldn't do some of the stupid stuff I did in the story, like punch a gigantic whale in the eye," White suggested with a chuckle. "Or do that stupid pinwheel attack and get stuck in concrete," Leo added with a mischievous grin, not realizing who Sojking was. "Or ask Chiffon if she's Baje, and then ask her fucking baby if he's Baje." White and Leo started cackling. Luffy blushed in embarrassment and cursed them. "Jerks, sorry. But you punching the whale actually led you to meet Crocus, got the log pose without which you would have died, and also met Vivi. So it wasn't a bad thing." Leo placated, seeing a pouting Luffy, but then added, "Boot the other things? Yep. Completely moronic. Ding-a-ling stupid. Rubber-brained idiot. Rubber-bone head." Luffy blushed in even more embarrassment and snapped, "There's no way I wouldn't have recognized who Sojking was or think that fake Sanji and Zoro on Sabayati were real. Oda just wrote me as more stupid than I am." Leo actually thought about it and nodded slowly. "Well, I can't actually deny that. You had observation at that point too, so there's no way you would have made that mistake. And you're way more perceptive than you let on. You understand things about people with very minute clues and make accurate conclusions. You just don't voice them out a lot, huh?" "Yeah, even I was surprised by that," White added. "Oda definitely made you more stupid for comedic purposes, cause not recognizing Sojking, fake Sanji and Zoro, or Caesar just doesn't make sense. You're stupid in understanding stuff, sure, but reading people? You do that amazingly well." "Yeah, well, I don't bother doing it a lot though, as it's kinda boring and also intrusive," Luffy said, sheepishly rubbing his head. "But now that I know the story, I guess I have context now too, so I would understand even more things if I faced such situations." "Yeah, you also have my memories of learning human psychology now, so you would be a bigger perceptive monster," Leo added with a smirk. Leo and White teased Luffy a bit more about some of the stupid stuff he does in the story, and after another laughing fit at a pouting and embarrassed Luffy, and a couple of bumps on Leo and White's head courtesy of Luffy's fists, conversation stopped and silence descended. Luffy and Leo were extremely worried about what would happen to Luffy's world, so they tried to joke around, but it was eating away at them that they couldn't do anything. They couldn't keep their minds off of the depressing and literal existential crisis they were facing. "So how long till we die?" Luffy asked, breaking the silence. "Around 3 more hours, I guess," White answered while scratching his chin. "Anything we can do to hopefully live?" Leo asked expectantly. "Luffy at least should survive." It was just a story, but experiencing Luffy's life made it so much more real. I can't imagine the horrors his crew and friends would face without him around." White thought for a moment before answering, "Trust me, I really want to help, but I don't think I can do anything here. I can't interfere in the mortal world in any way that would help you in your current predicament. It would be like if you tried to help 2 microbes. You would just end up killing them as they're so small compared to you. Same thing with me and you, as I'm on a much higher plane. Anything I try to do will just destroy your solar system. The only reason I'm even able to talk to you like this is because both of you are dying and are outside your universes near the soul plane. Your souls resonated with each other, sending out a strong signal of sorts, and thus I was able to find you and talk to you guys. I could help and interfere in your universe with tools, but it will take at least a month to set up. Like, think of helping microbes using micron microscopes and lasers, but it takes time to gather those materials right. Same with me. I don't have the right tools to interfere in your universe on such short notice. And once you completely ascend to the soul plane, even if I pull you out, you won't be able to go back to your universe, as souls who have integrated into the soul plane even once aren't allowed to go back to any universe." Luffy and Leo didn't understand much of what he said, but basically inferred that he couldn't interfere. "Best I can do is push you back into your universes, but you're both dying, so you'll soon just come back here again. You need help from someone in your world to treat you, and only then can you survive. I can also transfer one of yours time to the other, basically giving more time to one of you by sacrificing the other. But Luffy's poisoned and Leo's bleeding out with cut limbs on a lonely road. Even with extra time, I don't think either of you can survive." Leo and Luffy nodded at that, and there was another long stretch of silence as they thought of anything that could help them. Suddenly Leo perked up as he had thought of an idea. "Exactly how much time will Luffy get if you give my time to him?" "Around 7 minutes 8 hours. Luffy frowned and was about to ask Leo what he was thinking, but Leo cut him off excitedly. "You know where you are right. With the story's knowledge now, you should be able to figure it out." "Yeah, I already made the connection. I'm in Mariewa, right outside the Pangaea Castle, in a death pit to be exact, while the reverie is ongoing. And the bubble people were celestial dragons, and the slavers were killed because I used conquerors and made the bubble woman faint. Guess they didn't realize it was you who used conquerors," Leo guessed. "Yeah, but why wasn't I killed by that celestial dragon woman herself? And even before that, why did the slavers keep me alive for so long? Did they just want me to suffer that much? What did I even do to them?" "Well, you were too out of it because of sea stone and starvation and couldn't process what you were seeing, but I can see your subconscious memories too," White explained. "The first 2 slavers you pissed off by not obeying them took it personally. They kept trying to break you, and after a couple of weeks, it just became a sort of game for them to see who can break you first, and pretty soon, more people joined in on the game. Oh, I see. Yeah, and when the celestial dragon woman saw you laughing at her, she got offended and ordered the slavers to bring you to her. When you still didn't break after that week of torture, she definitely wanted you so that she can personally break you. But after the first escape attempt where you used conquerors and made her faint, she wanted that slaver group to be punished and even forgot about you as you were their product. Thus, all the leaders of the slavers were killed and the remaining slavers didn't know what exactly had happened, so they blamed you and prolonged your torture until your second escape attempt, after which the still surviving slavers gave up. So that's what happened. Luffy nodded in understanding. That resolve is amazing, Luffy. Leo chimed in with awe. And your second escape attempt? That was amazing with a capital A. Yeah, Luffy smiled at the praise. Hope Kel and the others are safe. Yeah, hopefully. Anyway, let's get back to the topic. You also realize that the reverie is still ongoing, right? This death pit was never shown in the story, but they are probably going to burn or bury everyone in the pit at the end. Yeah, probably. What are you getting at? It's been 3 days since you were thrown here, and do you remember what happened during the night for the past 3 days? Luffy thought for a bit and with confusion said nothing much. They were having parties in the castle. I remember some people who were looking at us, some even walking among us and some on us. There were some kids who were playing around too, using the slaves as toys. Yes, but I also saw some of them taking away anyone they wanted from the pit. Yeah, I do remember some people just taking any slave they want. But if you're thinking that someone will take a soon-to-be-dead lethally poisoned slave, I'm pretty sure it won't happen. If you know the right people to look for, then yes, they might. Luffy frowned, not understanding where Leo was going with this. Who? There were some nobles you recognize now, right? If I saw your memories correctly, I'm pretty sure I saw Vivi on the first day. I think she was shedding tears while looking at the pit. Oh yeah, that was Vivi. She looked so young. And she's not the only one. I saw the Germa too, Leo added excitedly, finally realizing what Leo was trying to say. Luffy gasped, you mean get the attention of Ryuju? She can heal me with her poison powers. Yes, she and her brothers have come every night, so they should be here tonight too. That's actually a really good plan, White agreed. Getting her attention should be easy, as she can probably sense if someone is staring at her, but what then? How will you convince her to save you? Not like she'll take pity and save a random slave. Leo and Luffy thought for a bit. You just have to mention Sanji, Leo finally said. Luffy had also come to the same conclusion. That's the only way he could survive here. Why not ask help from Vivi? White suggested. She's 14 now, so Crocodile has already started his plan to take over Alabasta, and she'll be going undercover very soon. If you reveal that Mr. Zero is Crocodile, she will help you in return. No, I don't think that'll work, Leo theorized. Luffy's just a random slave she found. Even if he somehow convinces her that it's Crocodile that is ruining her country, without proof, they would get nowhere, so she'll probably still go undercover. Besides, Crocodile isn't stupid. If he realized that Vivi and the royal family somehow knows his secret, he might propone his takeover or do something worse. And the Straw Hats won't be there to stop him. Also, if he propones his takeover and kidnaps the king and goes to the Poneglyph with Robin, Robin will obviously tell him nothing about Pluton, resulting in him killing her. Even if he doesn't, Robin will give up on life. After a few moments, Luffy also agreed, adding, right, if we're not there to stop him, no one will come to stop him. Even if I somehow convince the king that he's the one behind it all and the king asks for help from the world government, they might take this chance to strike a deal with Croc to wipe out Alabasta because of their stupid grudge against the Nefertaris. And we might lose Robin. Too many variables. Seeing Luffy analyzing a situation brought a smile to Leo's face. His personality had definitely rubbed off on him, as Luffy was just like him when he theorized on forums about any future events whenever a new chapter came out. He smiled, thinking that at least some of him will live on in Luffy after he's gone. I see. Makes sense. White agreed after processing what they said. So, mention Sanji in front of Ryuju and hope she helps. Leo concluded and looked at Luffy, who had a deep frown on his face. Knowing Luffy, he was probably thinking that this was kind of deceiving her and didn't like it. Look, Luffy, I know you'll have to trick her a bit, as telling her all this multiverse and comic book stuff is out of the question, as it will make you look crazy, and this might seem like you're deceiving her, but we've got no choice here. You have to need to survive. It's not out of malice. It won't hurt her in any way. In fact, she'll be happy to know that her brother is doing well and is happy, Leo explained, trying to convince Luffy. But Leo was taken aback when Luffy looked at him as if he was stupid. I understand that already, idiot. There are way too many lives riding on this, and I don't mind telling a white lie. That's not why I was frowning. Then why? Luffy gave him a small sad smile. You're the same as me, thinking about others even at the cost of your own life. Wah. Leo was taken aback. If my time and life are given to you, you'll surely be able to survive until morning, and the street where you had your accident will become relatively busier. If you have even 6 hours more, you'll be found by someone, taken to a hospital, and can probably survive. You also have important people in your life who will grieve for you if you're gone. Leo averted his gaze, awkwardly massaging the back of his head. He took a few moments to think and looked back into Luffy's eyes. Well, if you have my memories, you should know that I never really fit in. Sure, I had music as a passion and would have loved to produce music for a living. I had friends who I could call on to hang out or have fun. But even then, it felt kind of empty. And after Serena was gone, that feeling only got amplified. I wasn't satisfied with such a simple life. Like I wanted to do more. Not shackled by physical and monetary constraints. Go on adventures, not bound by stupid rules. Make friends with truly amazing people. Punch the living daylights out of tyrannical rulers and throw a huge victory party afterwards with everyone you save. You are a hero to your friends, Luffy. I know your stupid stance on being a hero, but you have to admit that throwing a victory party after overthrowing a tyrannical ruler feels really, really good. And that's pretty much my dream. Luffy agreed to that. He could imagine why he went around saving countries even though he didn't want to be a hero. Leo sighed, continuing, and if I took your life and went back to my world knowing full well that I denied you the chance to live our dream, it'll eat me up inside, and I guarantee that I'll end myself eventually. You have my memories, so you know I'm being absolutely truthful here. I want to do all the things I just mentioned, but my world just won't allow that. Basically, I want nothing more in my life than to be you. He added the last part softly as he was blushing profusely after saying something so cheesy. Why the fuck does this sound like a damn confession? Leo screamed internally. Why the fuck does this sound like a damn confession, you fucking asshole? Luffy yelled in mock anger and smacked him on the head. Both Luffy and Leo stared amusedly at each other for a second before they burst out laughing, while White was mimicking what Leo had said and was laughing his ass off too. After they calmed down, Leo held his hand out to Luffy asking for a handshake, but Luffy just ignored his hand and gave him a bone-crushing hug by wrapping his limbs around him, and he just laughed and returned the hug. Brothers? Luffy asked, and that crashed Leo's brain. Leo stared at Luffy dumbfounded. You're brother. He couldn't even get the words out and started gaping like a fish. Holy hell, Luffy just asked me to become his brother. This is the greatest thing that has happened to me in my life. But I'm already dead. Haha, dead joke. Sorry, Brook, for stealing your SH tick. Somewhere in the Florian Triangle aboard a ghost ship, a certain skeleton suddenly felt irritated for some reason. Come on, we literally know everything about each other. Let's become brothers. Luffy pressed on. Why yes, Leo finally stuttered, nodding his head vigorously. They wanted sake cups, but seeing where they were, they just pretended like they were holding sake cups and clinked their cups together and drank it, sealing their bond as brothers. Knowing that they didn't have much time and that every second was important so that Luffy could survive, Leo decided that it was time to say goodbye. Okay, no time to waste. Let's do this, Leo said, clapping his hands, and looked at White. Give me your hands, White told them both, and they obliged. White just stood there holding their hands, and after a few seconds he let go, nodding with a huge smile. Done. Leo, you'll start disappearing in a couple minutes, and Luffy, you'll wake up in your world soon after. You'll have more strength as you're getting new life energy. Don't waste it. Make every second count. And a few words of advice. The comic is a representation of your world, but with Oda inputting his own ideas and events. Stuff won't happen exactly like what he wrote. Reality is more complex. Also, don't assume you know people because the story describes them. People change. Like Ryuju, for example. The story shows her feelings at Whole Cake when you were 19. You are currently 15, so you don't know how she was at this point. Yes, I understand, Luffy nodded gratefully, looking at White. Also, Leo added, as we discussed earlier, Yuta is real and so is Nagiri. So let's assume all the movies and fillers are real too. And if those are real, then they must have an effect on the rest of the world, unlike in the manga. So things will be different. Yeah, and I hope I can meet Yuta sometime down the line. It's nice to know she's still alive at least. But the way Shanks was when he came back without her, I was pretty sure she had died. Yeah, damn, I was so hyped for the movie Red. And now I find out that Yuta was in fact real. I wonder what happened to her. From the trailers, it seems she did become a diva, but also looked like she might be the villain. When Leo died, the movie wasn't released yet, but the trailers and her songs were out, and Leo absolutely loved the songs. He also looked forward to the movie as it looked like it would go into Shanks' history too. But alas, he died before he could watch the movie, and thus had no idea what her story was apart from what he had seen of her in Luffy's childhood memories. Yeah, I hope she's okay. She was your first crush, Leo said with a small smile. You were just 7, but still, she was your first real friend and you really had a crush on her. Luffy also smiled, nodding his head. Yeah, I see that now. I wanted to get strong to impress her when she came back, so I trained hard. She was the first friend my age who didn't ostracize me and could also keep up with my monstrous strength. So, of course, I wanted her to acknowledge me and looked forward to seeing her every time. When she didn't come back, I was so heartbroken. I also said some bad things to Shanks when he didn't tell me what happened to her. Yeah, you even cried while being carried on Ben's back saying you wanted to get stronger. Man, there was so much stuff that happened with Shanks when you were younger that wasn't shown in the anime. And your life with Ace and Sabo too. Garp too. So much stuff happened. Shishishishi, yeah, not like Oda can draw each and every moment of my life, huh? Yeah, anyway, this just cements the fact that the stuff that happened in the story might not necessarily play out the same way in your reality. Yeah, White added, the movies look solo and don't make sense in the timeline of the anime, so if they are real, then they will play out differently. Luffy understood and nodded resolutely at that. Thanks, Leo. Thanks, White. I'm truly grateful. Leo also nodded gratefully at White. Yeah, thank you. It's nothing. You guys showed me something that's never happened before. That's more than enough payment for this small favor, White said with a smile. Not letting go of one last chance at teasing Luffy, Leo joked, you know how to thank someone properly now. Wow, asshole. Luffy fumed with a huffing pout, teasing me until the end. Leo chuckled seeing his very cute pout but then suddenly turned serious after a moment. Luffy, sensing the serious gaze, Luffy perked up listening to him intently. You have my memories now too, so answer me this, Leo said very seriously. Luffy gulped. What? Leo held Luffy's gaze for a couple more tense seconds and just as he felt himself disappearing, he asked in a serious deadpan voice, meat or sex? Which is better? Luffy just stared at him for a moment before his anger burst. Stupid jerk. I thought you were gonna tell me something important. Leo started to laugh his ass off, cackling like a madman before he started disappearing. Just before he fully disappeared, Leo calmed down, looked at Luffy and gave him a small smile. Live our dream, went unsaid but still understood by Luffy. Luffy returned a small smile of his own. I will, went unsaid but understood by Leo. As soon as Leo disappeared, Luffy could feel his own consciousness slipping. And the man who could become the Pirate King, the man who could become the freest man ever, the man who could flip the world upside down, the man who could become the most influential figure in history, the man who could save many lives and inspire generations of dreamers, the man who could bring hope into the lives of millions, the man who could become the ray of sunshine in this dark, fucked up world, returned to the land of the living. Ryuju was having a very bad week. It was Reverie time, the big meeting that occurs once every 4 years where a bunch of rulers from all over the world gathered together, each having their own agenda, and decided the fate of the world and discussed on how to make it a better place. What a joke. She scoffed internally as she watched her brothers and a few other princes torturing a few slaves to impress other princesses, including herself. The nobles didn't care about their own citizens, let alone the world. They only wanted to gain more power for their own families, and one of the major methods, after war of course, of how they did that was through marriage. And since she was the sole princess of the Germa kingdom, she had a lot of suitors. A lot of disgusting, morally corrupt and downright evil suitors, like the one standing in front of her right now. She had attended the previous 2 reveries, and it had been a nightmare both times. The first time she had attended, she was still just 12, and yet she already had people trying to woo her to get her family's power. The number had increased at the next one when she was 16. And this reverie, she was 20, and the number of people who wanted to get in her and her family's good graces had exponentially risen. She had to sweetly talk to them no matter how disgustingly they were behaving and shoot down any proposals they would make in a non-hostile way. See how strong I am, an idiotic prince boasted as he broke the arm of an already broken slave as if it was the most impressive feat ever, and she smiled as if she was impressed. She, her brothers, and a few other noble children were currently at the slave death pit playing with some of the slaves. The almost dead, broken, hollow-eyed slaves who were thrown out here in the death pit because they were deemed as useless. That's what the death pit was, a dumping ground for anything useless. It was also a reminder to all the kingdoms that attended the reverie about a certain incident. There was a certain country from West Blue that had once opposed the world government a few decades ago. At the following reverie, the entire royal family of that country, including children, were publicly beaten up and thrown in the death pit, and a new family took over as royals of that country. The old family was labeled as traitors for an entirely unrelated matter and thus were given the death verdict by the celestial dragons and thrown in the death pit, but everyone knew that it was all made up. That family was killed because they had opposed the WG, were deemed as useless by them, and thus were thrown into the death pit. Since then, the death pit became an unspoken threat and a reminder to all the attending kingdoms that if they ever opposed the WG, then they too would be deemed as useless and their family would face the same fate as the slaves in the pit. They could argue and discuss matters, sure, but if they ever outright opposed the WG, then they would find themselves in the death pit. Most nobles didn't care about it though, as they never had any intention of opposing the WG, and most of them, especially the younger generations, just treated the death pit as a playground where they could play with slaves. Just like the ones Ryuju was with currently, who thought breaking a couple of bones of a person who didn't even fight back was a superhuman feat which deserved all the praise in the world. Ryuju sighed internally as she looked around the pit and saw that a few other nobles were also manhandling the slaves. There were also a few that looked at the pit with horrified expressions, and there were even a couple that tried to talk to the slaves. But all the poor souls here were unresponsive. She could understand why, as these slaves had been through a lot and had given up on life. All they wanted was the sweet release of death and escape from their hellish lives. Ryuju focused her gaze back to the idiotic prince when he started boasting about how he had 1,000 slaves back in his kingdom, and she nodded with a smile as if she was impressed and interested. She also overheard her own brothers boasting about all the ways they had tortured people to impress the other princesses with them. She was in close proximity with her brothers for the past few weeks, and she was extremely tired of them. A murderous father and 3 equally murderous brothers was the family she was a part of. Back at their kingdom, she could kind of avoid them by shutting herself off in her own castle, saying that she was performing certain experiments with poison. Not for long periods of time, as they would still eat at least one meal together every day and spend time discussing the kingdom governing matters. But she still got her own free time, which was better than nothing. Also, she and her brothers all had their own separate branches of the Germa kingdom they were responsible for. And apart from reports, she didn't have to spend a lot of time with them. So, she usually got enough time away from them to keep her sanity in check. But because of the reverie, she had to spend a lot of time in close proximity to them on the to and fro journey from their kingdom to Mariewa, and also at the reverie. And the reverie itself was a concentration of people who were similar to her monstrous family. "Why don't you play too?" snapped that one's neck. "It's fun." The idiot prince interrupted her thoughts as he pointed at another slave with an excited grin. "I don't like to get my hands dirty," Ryuju answered with a smile. "I'm a fan of poisons, you see." Yes, Yanji chimed in excitedly. "You should see how some of her poisons work. It's amazing to watch how the person suffers." "Oh, I see." The idiot prince nodded in understanding. "You are poison pink after all." Yes, Ryuju giggled, pretending to enjoy the praise. She had to keep up the facade with everyone. She had to smile when a stupid prince made an inappropriate comment about her. She had to smile when she saw her brothers acting the same way towards other princesses. She had to laugh at their disgusting jokes even when they basically called other races as subhuman. She had to laugh when they showed off their slaves and the cool tricks they could do. She had to laugh when her own brothers went to the death pit and started a game of who can make the slaves scream the loudest. She hated them all, but outwardly she had to keep a facade of liking the lavish lifestyle, the elitist mindset, the slaves, the torturing, and even take pride in it. And she had to laugh, smile and laugh. She was so tired of it. She just wanted to get away from it all, but she couldn't. She wanted to run away like her only sane brother did. But she knew her father well enough to know it wouldn't work. Judge valued her too much to just let her get away. He would send armies after her if she ever tried anything like that, and so the only way she could escape from it all was through death. And besides, as much as she hated it, she was a monster herself who did whatever her father ordered her to do because she was engineered to follow his every order. Be it torturing and killing a single man, or hordes of men, she did it without the slightest bit of hesitation. She was a cruel, cold monster who could kill even a child without a second thought if her father ordered her to do it. So ultimately she was just like her father and brothers, only in the quite lonely nights would she allow herself to feel and cry herself to sleep, remembering all the messed up shit she had done and all the blood she had on her hand. But in front of everyone else, she was a stone-cold monster who enjoyed tormenting others with her poison. Ryuju watched as her brothers and all the other nobles continued playing while she giggled and commented at appropriate moments on reflex. It was currently the 3rd day of the reverie, and as only the heads of the families could actually attend the round table meeting, the other family members just had to wait outside the meeting room mingling with the other families. That particular day in the evening, her brothers had asked her to go with them to the slave death pit to beat up the useless slave. Again, they had done it on the past 3 days but still weren't satisfied with torturing the already broken people. Some other nobles overheard it, and thus here she was, in the middle of the death pit playing with the slaves, laughing at all the antics the others were performing on the poor slaves. "You guys will soon get your wish," Ryuju mentally said to all the slaves in the pit. "They're gonna set you all ablaze on the last day of the reverie, so you will get your death pretty soon. So, just hang in there." As her brothers continued their game and she was laughing with them, her instincts flared up and she felt an intense gaze on her. She looked around trying to find the source, wondering if someone was planning to attack her, but soon found out that it was a man lying in the death pit who was responsible. He was on his back with his face turned towards her and his eyes were boring holes into her. He had cuts on pretty much his entire body, had dried and fresh blood mixing around his open wounds causing a blood sludge of sorts, was shirtless and his blue shorts was torn in most places that it was barely holding together, and his hand was clutching a straw hat. What caught her attention the most were his eyes. They were resolute and unyielding, unlike the rest of the others in the pit. She could feel power and a will to live behind those eyes, and he was gazing right at her. Feeling slightly intrigued, she made her way towards him, which caused the lips of the man to turn slightly up. He smiled. Feeling even more intrigued, she started observing him more carefully the closer she got to him. Pretty much his whole face was covered in red, dried blood, no doubt. He was fairly short and she couldn't see his complexion because of all the blood on him, but the parts of his skin that were visible was purplish. She made the conclusion that he was probably poisoned as she finally reached him. He was still staring at her with a small smile as his mouth started quivering a bit. He was trying to say something, but either the poison seemed to be affecting him or he was just that tired. Ryuju just waited for him to muster up the energy to talk. Help, the man finally managed to mutter. She was a bit surprised as he was probably the first person she had seen in these pits who didn't want to die. And also because he had purposefully gotten her attention for some reason. But in the end, she didn't think much of the situation as she really couldn't just go around saving every man who asked for help. She had a persona to keep after all. She just turned her back to him and was going to go back to her brothers, but before she could take the first step away from him, she heard the man's voice again. SS Sanji. No. That stopped her dead in her tracks. She snapped her head back at him and stared at the man incredulously. Did he just say Sanji? She could still see his defiant eyes, but just muttering those words seemed to have taken a lot out of him, and his eyes were now slowly closing. She went up to him, lifted him up by his throat and brought his face up to her eye level and hissed, "What the hell did you just say?" The man just stared back with half-lidded eyes and his lips quivered slightly as he tried his hardest to speak. No. San. He knows Sanji. Ryuju internally exclaimed and waited to hear more from him, but he didn't say anything else as his eyes slowly closed. Couldn't say anything else, she realized, and started panicking a bit. The poison was killing him and she didn't want to be left hanging after hearing a name she had thought she would never ever hear in her life again. Ryuju wanted to ask a million different things and think about what he had said. But if she needed answers, she needed to save him first. She immediately decided to take him back to their ship and started making her way towards the docking area. "What are you doing?" Yanji asked, suddenly popping up beside her, startling her a bit, but thankfully, she managed to school her expressions to remain neutral. She had forgotten about everything as soon as she had heard Sanji's name, and her mind just wanted to know who this man was and what connection he had to Sanji. Without missing a beat, she lied, "I'm taking this one back to the ship." The poison in his system should have killed him immediately, but he seems to have somehow held on for days. Need to run some tests on him. Yanji just shrugged, buying the lie as he knew that Ryuju was crazy about poisons, and went back to his brothers and the others. Ryuju quickly said her goodbyes and made her way to their ship, hoping the man wouldn't die before she got her answers. As soon as she made it to the ship, she speed-walked to her lab, quickly got inside, locked the door and brought the man to the bathroom. She put his head under the tap and ran a good amount of water while also wiping his face with some paper towels. She noticed more of his face had gone very purple now, so immediately locked lips with him and started sucking the poison out. She sucked for a full minute as her powers worked, the poison traveling from the man's body into her own. Her body was genetically modified to handle poisons, as it would break down the poisons into simpler elements and immediately create antibodies to combat it, so she wasn't in any danger. She also recognized the poison by its taste. It was a lethal poison that would slowly kill the person over a few days, that was usually used to make sure that a person died a slow and painful death. She sucked and licked all the poison out before breaking the lip lock and blew out some of the gaseous toxin. That was tasty, she thought, licking her lips before looking down at the man's relatively healthier face as it slowly regained its color. And it was only then that she noticed how young he looked and realized he was just a boy of at most 60. She saw all the scars, burns, puncture wounds, broken bones, the sea stone cuffs, and grimaced at the sight. He had been tortured a lot over many months, judging by how old some of the wounds looked. She decided to patch up some of the more serious wounds a bit so that he would have a better chance at living. It took an hour for her to clean and stitch up many of the serious wounds, and once done, she placed him on a desk in her lab. It was only after she was done that she finally sat down and took a minute to think about the whole situation. A random discarded slave had gotten her attention specifically and told her he knew Sanji. Assuming that he did in fact know Sanji, or someone who he thought was Sanji, had the boy just happened to spot a family member of Sanji at the moment of his death. She finally noticed how weird the situation actually was. The amount of chances that led to this would have to have been insane. First, the boy had to know Sanji. Second, he had to know that Sanji was actually a Vinsmoke who was disowned. Third, he had to end up in the slave pit in Mariewa of all places. Fourth, he had to spot her and her brothers and realize they were related. And lastly, he had to specifically get her attention and not the other brothers, who wouldn't have given a second thought even if he had muttered Sanji's name. That scenario was assuming he was just a normal boy who unfortunately got enslaved. She thought about another scenario where he was specifically sent here by Sanji. Sanji could have told him all about himself, about the Vinsmokes and the Reverie, and the boy was here to convey some message to her from him. But she quickly dismissed the thought, as no one sane enough would have put themselves through that much torture just to end up almost dead in the death pit and be picked up by her. There were a ton of better ways to reach her. Another scenario was that he was a spy. Again, the fact of someone willingly putting themselves through that much torture seemed insane. But she had seen some people who would actually go through worse things if they believed in something bigger. CP agents were a perfect example of this, as she had seen some of them give up their own lives without a care if it meant serving the world government. So, he could be a spy, Ryeju concluded, and then began starting to wonder what his goal could be. Learning that the third prince of Germa wasn't dead. Why would anyone even suspect that in the first place? And what would that even achieve? Someone found Sanji and are now going to blackmail the Germa by holding him hostage. Yes, that could be a very real possibility. They could be doing this thinking that Judge actually gave a shit about Sanji and think they could blackmail the Germa by holding him hostage. But then again, why would they even get their attention in such a manner? Sending a boy, who had very clearly undergone severe torture, to negotiate with them. There were a million different ways that they could have used to discreetly get their attention. Ryeju's head was going through all sorts of possibilities. Their family had a lot of enemies, so he could be a spy from the multiple kingdoms in North Blue that hated them, as Judge was very vocal about his dream of conquering the entirety of North Blue. After a few minutes of an endless thought spiral, she finally concluded that she just didn't have enough information to make any accurate conclusions. She just had to talk to the guy and figure out what he wants and how he knows Sanji. She frowned when she realized that the boy wasn't going to wake up anytime soon. And she also didn't want to seem desperate to find out about Sanji in case he really was a spy. So she had no other choice but to just wait for him to wake up. She chained him up to a desk so that he couldn't escape or try anything. Then picked up a book, took a seat in her favorite comfy sofa chair, and started to read as she waited for the boy to regain consciousness. Luffy slowly opened his eyes, blinking repeatedly to clear his hazy vision, and laid eyes on an unfamiliar stone ceiling. He tried to sit up, hoping his body would move, and fortunately, his body was responsive now. As he sat up, he realized his hands were chained up to a desk, and also noticed a pink-haired woman sitting in a chair across the room from him who had clearly fallen asleep with a book in her hand. He looked down at himself and saw several layers of bandages wrapped around pretty much his entire body. So, it worked. Ryeju actually saved me, he cheered with a smile. He had waited patiently for 6 hours, without moving a muscle to conserve his energy, before he finally caught a glimpse of her. After successfully catching her attention and using all his energy just to mutter a few words, he had lost consciousness, hoping that she would save him. And it had worked. Luffy looked around and noticed that the room was some kind of laboratory with all sorts of vials, beakers, chemicals, and other chemistry equipment, and also a ton of books. Probably Ryeju's lab, he inferred. His hand first went to his head, and not feeling the rough texture of his hat, he started looking around for it everywhere before he spotted it on a desk at the opposite end of the room. He reflexively tried to launch his hand to grab it, but he still had sea stone cuffs on his wrists, so his arms didn't stretch, making him sigh in annoyance. He let it be for now as he turned his eyes back to Ryeju and saw that her eyes were now wide open, studying him curiously. Apparently, she had woken up at some point, or she was never sleeping in the first place and just wanted to test what he would do if he found her asleep. Hi, Luffy greeted with a smile, raising his hand. Ryeju, who had just pretended to be asleep to see what he would do just like Luffy had predicted, studied him curiously. She wanted to see what he would do first upon waking up, and saw that he looked for his hat first, then tried to punch something. Luffy continued when she didn't say anything. First of all, thank you for saving my life, and also for treating my wounds, he muttered in a raspy voice, his mouth very dry, while bowing gratefully to her. Seeing that he was struggling to speak, Ryeju poured him a glass of water and offered it to him, which Luffy gratefully accepted and gulped down. So who are you? Hi, I'm Luffy, future Pirate King. Nice to meet you, Luffy greeted with his signature D grin. You're a pirate? Ryeju asked, surprised. Well, a pirate wasn't something she had thought of in all her delusions of who Luffy could be. She didn't care about the Pirate King claim, though, as a lot of pirates claimed that they were going to become the Pirate King, and they all were delusional idiots without strength who would either break or die when they saw the real world. Besides, he was just a boy and wasn't all that strong, so she didn't take his claim seriously. The way he had said it, as if it was just an offhand thing, did intrigue her, but she didn't give it much thought. Not yet. I'm gonna set out at 17. Okay, so why did you say Sanji? She honestly wasn't interested about his life and just wanted to know why he had said Sanji's name. I was a bit out of it, so I don't know what I managed to mutter. What did I say? You just said help, no, and Sanji. That's it. Wow. Well, at least I managed to say that much. Ryeju just stared at him, waiting for him to continue. She was getting impatient, as she was dying to find out if this boy knew her brother, but didn't let her desperation show on her face. Well, Luffy continued, what I actually wanted to say was help me and I'll tell you about Sanji. I know him. You know my dead brother. She deadpanned. Dead brother. Luffy first panicked, wondering if this was a universe in which Sanji had died by Judge's hands itself, but soon calmed down when he recalled what had happened in the story. Sanji was declared as dead by Judge when he found out he hadn't manifested any powers. But in actuality he was locked up in a dungeon. And when Sanji escaped, Judge had told him that he would let him go on the condition that he would never claim to be a Vinsmo. And so, as far as the rest of the world was concerned, the third son of the Germa kingdom was dead. Ryuju frowned when he just went silent, seemingly thinking about something. Yes, dead brother, she reiterated, now getting a bit annoyed. He's not dead. I know him, Luffy said, her impatient tone bringing him out of his thoughts. He died a long time ago. Luffy took a moment to think before responding with a chuckle. Okay, then I saw his ghost. Ryuju just glared at him, got up, came up to him, curled her fingers around his throat and dangerously growled, You think this is a game? You do realize you're talking to the princess of the Germa kingdom, right? Luffy answered nonchalantly. Seeing not even an ounce of fear when she threatened him, she reevaluated the boy in her mind. Him being a spy seemed more likely now. But then again, if he was a spy, he would have pretended to be scared and weak here to make her let her guard down. Also, a spy wouldn't make stupid jokes like that. She held off on making any conclusions for now as she let go of his throat slightly, but still kept her fingers loosely wrapped around his throat as she said, Talk. I'll hear you out at least before I kill you. I'm curious to see what kind of story you'll concoct. I'm trying to, but if you deny he's alive and I say he's alive, and I turn out to be wrong, it'll just be me giving you false hope that he's alive. Do you see my dilemma? Luffy said with a frown. This wasn't the manga, and it could be possible that in this universe, Sanji had in fact died at Judge's hand itself. It could be possible that he never escaped and Ryuju was currently telling the truth. So, he did not want to give false hope to Ryuju, but judging by how she had reacted when she had heard his name back at the pit, he was pretty sure the events in the story had happened and Sanji had escaped. But he wasn't 100% sure, so he tried to get her to talk more to judge whether he had escaped or not, but she just got annoyed by him instead. No, I don't. What do you mean you could be wrong? You don't know whether Sanji is alive or not? Ryuju asked, still not admitting anything. Okay, it's more likely that he is a spy. He's trying to make me talk. Could he be sent by Judge? No, he's the one who let Sanji go that day after telling him not to call himself a Vinsmoke anymore, so there would be no point to this. Some other country's spy. The day she had helped Sanji escape, she had also overheard the conversation between Judge and Sanji. When she saw that Sanji was seemingly caught by Judge, she had quickly run towards them but hid behind a building when she heard her father saying that he'll let him go if he disowned his family name. She was honestly happy for Sanji as she knew he didn't want to associate with their family either. So Judge sending Luffy as a spy to probe if she knew Sanji was alive or not was meaningless. Besides, she had acted as the perfect child in front of him and had his complete trust. Ryuju had a steely calm look on her face, but her mind was in turmoil thinking about all kinds of scenarios of who Luffy could be. I might have seen him, Luffy said, bringing her out of her thoughts. That's not possible, Ryuju reiterated again before tightening her hold around his neck. Who are you working for? And what's your goal here? Luffy didn't want to really trick her, but he saw that he was making her life harder by making her think he was some kind of spy. She was no doubt thinking that he was some spy from the world government or some other country. If he revealed all the higher dimensional being and comic book stuff with no proof, he would only be making her more paranoid and wary of him. So, he decided that he had no choice but to tell a white lie. He didn't like it but decided he would come clean later. Listen, Ryuju, just hear me out, will you? You can check me for any listening devices. You can take me to some random place so that you're sure no one else is listening. You can poison me and hold the antidote over my head. Do whatever the hell you want. I'm not working with anyone, and all I'm trying to do here is to get help to escape this place. You already cured me of the poison that was killing me, so thank you for that. If you could also drop me off at the next island you stop at, I'll be grateful. Ryuju studied him for a few moments, going through everything he said. And in exchange you want to give me information about my dead brother? She finally asked, removing her hand from around his throat. Yeah, Luffy answered, wondering why she let go. He watched as she went to one of the desks, picked up a black staff and walked back to him. She removed a sort of cap from the top of the staff, revealing what looked like 2 iron rods sticking out, and without warning, touched the rods to his skin. Luffy yelped in pain as 1,000,000 volts of electricity coursed throughout his entire body as it jerked violently, and Luffy's brain registered the fact that he was being electrocuted for some reason, but couldn't form any other coherent thought. Ryuju electrocuted him for a good 20 seconds before finally breaking contact, and Luffy slumped down, panting hard, his whole body feeling like it had just been set on fire. Now we can talk, Ryuju said, capping the powerful taser staff back. This room is soundproof, and also any snails can't transmit outside as I've blocked it off with horn transponder snails that jam signals. I already checked you for any listening devices too, but I hadn't considered recorders. That shock just now would have fried any recorders you could have hidden inside your body. My ISC. Luffy stammered, pushing himself back up with his shaky hands. His whole body was feeling like it wasn't in his control and he could barely form any coherent thought, but after a good full minute, he finally regained enough senses to talk. And the whole time, Ryuju just observed him. She definitely wanted to know more about Sanji, and they both knew that he was alive. She still didn't drop the act of saying her brother was dead though, and instead decided to pretend like she was just entertaining his story. Luffy sighed, finally getting control over his body back. Isn't this a bit too much paranoia? Why do you even think I'm a spy? I was almost dying out there, you know. Yeah, I honestly didn't think much of you either. I cleaned all your wounds up, so I know you were severely tortured for months. All the checks I did previously were just a force of habit which I couldn't help but notice while treating you. What changed? The way you talk, I guess. Fearless even when I threaten you. I would have expected you to at least feel a tiny bit of fear. A spy would have acted to be fearful of you and make you let your guard down, you know. And how would you know? Ooh, I've seen Black Widow in action. You should see how amazing she is in making people talk. Who? Black Widow? Natasha Romanoff, Luffy said with a smile as if that would explain everything. Seeing the blank look on her face, Luffy continued, she works for S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D.? Is that the organization you work for? Shishishishi, no way would I work for anyone. But I want to go on a helicarrier at least once. He trailed off with a wistful look on his face. Seeing the extremely confused look on Ryuju's face, Luffy chuckled and came clean. I'm talking about a movie. You were talking about a damn fictional character. She snapped. Oh, you poor sweet summer child, Luffy said with pity, if only you knew. They were also damn fictional characters in another universe just like Natasha. He was pretty sure the Marvel Universe would also be somewhere out there in the wide expanse of the multiverse. It was unsettling, exciting, horrifying, and also amazing all at the same time. The fuck does that mean? If only I knew what, Ryuju demanded. Shishishishi, don't worry about it, Luffy waved it off. Let's stop talking about fictional stories, yeah. You're the one bringing up random stuff. Shishishishi. Ryuju picked up the taser staff again and electrocuted him for a good minute, by the end of which Luffy was drooling and mumbling incomprehensibly on the floor. I suggest you stop messing around and treating this like a game, she growled after he regained some of his senses. Yeah, Luffy wheezed, shaking his head and getting control of his body back. Is this what facing Enel would be like without my rubber body? He sighed, ridding his mind of all his random thoughts and concentrated on his current situation. Well, judging by how much you're going through right now, I think I can safely assume that Sanji is alive. Wait, you thought about recorders, but what about devil fruits? I could be using some sort of devil fruit to transmit whatever we're talking right now to someone else. Right. You're wearing sea stone cuffs. I already verified that they are real. So covered all your bases, huh? You know, if you really want to convince me that you're not some sort of spy, you're making a really bad case for yourself right now. Yeah, I know, but I haven't played mind chess like this before, you know. It's kinda fun, Shishishishi. I love spy movies, and have even roleplayed 7 when I was younger. I don't care. Ryuju snapped, zapping him a couple more times. Okay. Luffy placated before starting. Well, about Sanji, let me tell you about the Sanji I know. Deciding whether he's your brother or not is up to you. Okay. Ryuju just sat down in her chair and leveled a glare at him. Go ahead. Okay. First, I noticed that your third brother is missing. There's Rei, Ikai, Nai, and Yon, so Sanji's the name of your third brother. Ryuju nodded. Reasonable deduction. She didn't question how he knew her and her brother's names. They were pretty famous after all. And I have actually seen a guy named Sanji before. Ryuju frowned and with a low dangerous growl said, if you're saying that you talked to someone named Sanji and now telling me that that's my brother, I'm killing you right now. I said I saw him. I didn't actually talk to him, he corrected, unperturbed by her threat before continuing. The guy had swirly eyebrows and goes gaga with hearts in his eyes whenever he sees any girl and tries to flirt with them. Sounds just like your other brothers. Tell me it isn't a reasonable assumption to think he's related to you. Ryuju was unconvinced. Not enough. You could just be using my other brothers as a reference to describe Sanji. Their obsessive tendencies towards women are well known after all. Luffy frowned and nodded at that. Yeah, makes sense. Let me give you more details then. He's working in a restaurant right now and is a very good chef. Kind, caring, feeds anyone, even people who show up at the restaurant with no money, and beats up anyone who wastes food. Also, he's blonde and covers one of his eyes with his hair just like you do. Okay, that definitely sounds like Sanji, Ryuju exclaimed in her mind, now slightly convinced that it was her brother. His dream of becoming a cook was known only to her. She hoped that this boy was telling the truth and felt happy on the inside knowing that he was living his dream and had become a cook. But of course she couldn't trust his words completely. Is that it? Yes. So you met a guy called Sanji who likes to flirt, and you jumped to the conclusion that he's a dead prince? Well, when you put it like that. Luffy trailed off, thinking that he didn't really have a way to convince her that it was her Sanji without divulging that he knew about their childhoods, which would require him to tell her about stuff which he should have had no way of knowing, and that was another headache altogether. She was already paranoid of him, and if he started talking about how she would first bully Sanji with all her brothers but would later secretly treat him, she would become extremely agitated and paranoid. He racked his brain for anything else that could convince her, and thankfully, he remembered something. Oh, also, his eyebrows curled towards the right unlike the rest of the brothers. Ryuju blinked in honest surprise. That was certainly true, and coupling this fact with him being a cook, she concluded that there might be some truth to what the boy was claiming. She took a few moments to think before asking, "That's it?" "Yes, I was in the pit dying and then I saw you guys. I knew Sanji and thought I could tell you about him, and in exchange you can save my life. That's all. You specifically got my attention. There were a couple of others who were trying to talk and help the people in the pit. You could have gotten their attention too and gotten saved. Any reason for choosing me, or was it just a random whim?" If the boy was telling the truth, then on top of all the coincidences, he also had to choose her specifically and tell her. No one else could have cured his poison. "I think one girl did check up on me the first day I got thrown in the pit but moved on. Not sure if that did happen though, as I was pretty out of it. Anyway, I was poisoned and it was killing me. You're poison pink. You were pretty much the only one here who could have helped me. I see, that makes sense of why he chose to specifically get my attention at least. But still, all the other coincidences were a bit too much. He had to know Sanji, and at the moment of his death, run into her of all people. It seemed to be too coincidental. Is that all?" "Yep. Well, too bad for you. My brother died a long time ago. You saw someone who looked like him, I guess." I see. Luffy didn't want to argue anymore. She didn't want to let it slip that her brother was alive, and he wasn't gonna force her either. "Okay then. I say he's your Sanji, and you deny it, saying he's dead. What now?" "That's all I had," Ryuju hummed in thought before saying, "Well, I guess since you had nothing of value to give to me, I should throw you back in the pit." "I see. What? Not even gonna protest?" "I would, but you're just saying that. You have no intention of throwing me back in that hellhole. Why do you think that?" "Because you're kind." Huh. Ryuju's mind blanked for a second, hearing words she had never expected to hear in her life. "Because you're kind," Luffy reiterated. "Your other brothers are monsters, but not you." Ryuju was left speechless. That statement had caught her completely off guard. He had called her kind. This boy had just called her kind. This boy who had seen her torturing the others at the pit and electrocuted him so many times had just called her kind. Ryuju couldn't focus on anything other than that fact, and she had to know how and why the boy had come to such a conclusion. "Are you out of your mind? What makes you think I'm kind? I was laughing while my brothers were torturing those poor souls, and you just called me kind. Did you also forget I just electrocuted you a few minutes ago?" Luffy grinned. "See, that just proves my point." "What? Just now, you called them as poor souls. Any other asshole here would have called them as slaves, toys, playthings. But you, on the other hand, didn't dehumanize them." Ryuju just sat in stunned silence, cursing herself for her blunder. "I observed you guys and the others a lot," Luffy continued, not giving her a chance to spiral into any conclusions. "Couldn't do much considering I couldn't move. I saw you yourself didn't torture or play with any of them and just laughed at what your brothers were doing, which was horrendous, by the way. The first day I saw you, I did think that you were just like all the others too, but also noticed that you didn't participate and just watched. I had chalked it up to you not liking to touch dirty slaves and all. But considering how you treated me," he said, pointing at all the bandages wrapped around him, "that's not the case at all. You just don't like this whole thing. Period. And to prove my point further, you called them as poor souls. You were kind." Ryuju was left speechless as she didn't know how to respond to that. People had called her many things before. Heartless, monster, inhuman, but never kind. She herself believed that she was a heartless monster, as she had done a lot of things she wasn't proud of because of her family, and she felt that she deserved those titles. But kind, she just sat there staring at the smiling boy, not knowing how to proceed with the conversation. "Wait, is this some sort of new technique?" "Yes, that must be it. He's appealing to my humanity to get close to me. He's good. Probably trained by the world government. A CP0 agent maybe. Need to make him mess up and reveal himself." Ryuju was making all kinds of assumptions in her mind and thinking of all sorts of ways she could extract the truth from him. Not seeing any further movement from Ryuju, Luffy just shrugged and started looking for any food in the room. He saw some chocolate bars on a nearby desk, so moved to pick them up. Seeing him move, however, alarmed Ryuju, as she instantly went on guard and yelled, "What are you doing?" Luffy, who was reaching out to the desk with the chocolate bars, froze midway and stared at Ryuju with a sweat drop. I just wanted those chocolate bars. Are you really that scared of me? I'm like, not even a quarter as powerful as you, or even in my best condition." Ryuju actually felt embarrassed on the inside as she had overreacted, but she couldn't help herself. Her mind had been thrown off by his comments and was running wild with all sorts of scenarios of who Luffy could be, and when she saw him move suddenly, she became alarmed. She let her battle stance go and sat back in her chair with a small cough, pretending as if that hadn't just happened, and Luffy's sweat dropped again before shrugging and grabbing the chocolate bars. Ryuju also realized that she was going crazy with all her delusions. All the boy had done was call her kind. Maybe he was just appealing to her humanity. She watched as he devoured the chocolate bars within 2 seconds, 1.5 seconds of which was spent trying to get the chocolate out of its wrapper, and it looked like he wanted more. Feeling extremely hungry, Luffy pleaded, "Can you please get me some food? Meat preferably. I haven't eaten a proper meal in months. We can continue the conversation later." That brought Ryuju out of her speculations, and she looked at his body. True, he did look like he had shriveled up and hadn't eaten for a long time. She had noticed all the wounds and the various burn and scar marks while treating him, and if he was actually just a normal boy and not some spy, she felt bad for him. But she couldn't let her guard down, so didn't acquiesce to his request, as she would have to leave him alone in the room, during which he could contact anyone on the outside or do something else. She also couldn't contact any maids from this part of the ship, as it was off limits to everyone. She had told everyone that no one should come near her lab due to safety reasons, but the actual reason was so that she could get away from everyone and have some alone time. Her labs on every Germa ship was always hers, and hers alone, and no one else entered it or walked in its general vicinity. "Can't do that. You might do something while I'm gone." "Media," Luffy whined, slumping down sideways and sighing with a pout. Seeing him pout honestly surprised Ryuju, as the only word that was coming to her mind was cute. She was building him up to be this master spy and interrogator trained from a young age by the WG and all sorts of other delusions. And then he just goes and calls her a meanie like a child, and then pouts like a child. And on top of all that, she thought his pouting face looked really cute. Before she could have any more spiraling thoughts, Luffy whined again. "Come on, you already denied that the Sanji I know is not your Sanji. So what can I even do? You can also take me along or something, can't you? I'm really hungry." Ryuju sighed, seeing his pitiful whining state, and gave in. He was right after all. He had no information to pass on either way. But her entire life, where she had distrusted pretty much everyone, still warned her to be wary of him. She went to one of the cabinets, took out a syringe, came up to him and plunged it into his arm without warning. "What's this?" Luffy asked curiously, watching the liquid from the syringe entering his body. "Paralyzing/sleeping agent. So that you can't talk or even be awake while I'm gone to bring food." "Oh," was all Luffy could say before his body fell forward and his world went black. When he regained consciousness again, Ryuju was in front of him with a plate of food. And fortunately, it was meat. Meat. Luffy cheered happily and devoured whatever was on the plate in just a second. Ryuju, who had just gone to the kitchen and brought the food, was shocked at the seemingly magical way the food had disappeared. She hadn't even seen him eat it. 1 second the food was there, and then the next it had disappeared. If not for the gulping sounds she heard from Luffy, she would have assumed that she had actually forgotten to add food and had just brought an empty plate. Ryuju stared at Luffy incredulously, who looked back at her pitifully and with a sad tone asked, "That's it?" Ryuju, without saying a word, injected him with the sleeping agent again, went out after locking the lab, went to the kitchen, grabbed a sack and stuffed as much food as she could, brought it back to the lab, injected him with the antidote, handed the sack of food to him when he regained consciousness, and watched him as he immediately started devouring the food with a bright smile. She just sat there staring at the boy in disgust and awe as he devoured the food. Watching Luffy eat, she gained a whole new understanding of the phrase "eats like a pig" that day. "Thanks for the food." Luffy cheered as he finished the last piece of meat in the sack. He definitely needed more, but was satisfied for now. Besides, he didn't feel like he had to eat more right now and wondered why, as he had never felt that before. "You must have been really hungry, huh?" Ryuju commented with a sweat drop. Yeah, but I usually eat way more. I see. It's because of the sea stone. My stomach usually stretches the more I eat, but now it can't. So I'm feeling full," Luffy concluded sagely. Ever since he was forced into the cuffs, he had never eaten more than a single plate's worth of food, so he hadn't noticed it before. "Did you say your stomach usually stretches?" "Yep, I ate the gum fruit. I'm a rubber human," he said with a grin, and proceeded to stretch his lips horizontally, no doubt expecting it to stretch. Obviously failing, he cursed the stupid sea stone, and pouted again, which looked extremely cute and funny to Ryuju. She tried to hold back her laughter but ultimately failed, and a small giggle escaped her mouth. She didn't know if Luffy was being truthful or if he was some spy, but he sure was funny. Realizing she had let her guard down, she shook her useless thoughts away and decided to continue the interrogation. "So, where were we? I called you kind and you freaked out," Luffy stated simply. Ryuju again felt embarrassed at her overreaction as she coughed with a slight blush. "Let's forget you ever said that, as I am not kind. I've killed and tortured hundreds of people over my life without a shred of remorse." "Sure," Luffy said nonchalantly. That again peeved her, and she wanted to argue with him more about this topic, but decided to get back to Sanji. "Now, about the Sanji you know. What have you done to him?" "Huh, what do you mean? You seem to think I care about Sanji, and so you're telling me Sanji is alive?" ignoring whether that is my brother or just some random person. You clearly want to use that fact to blackmail me. Luffy just stared at her, feeling sad that she had to grow up in such an environment where she had no choice but to doubt people like this so much. He sighed, rubbing his face, and looked at her seriously. Ryuju, I already told you. I just want to escape from this place. I haven't even talked to Sanji, let alone kidnap him or something. And I have no intention of blackmailing you or anything. I thought you would like to know he was doing good. That's all. If you want, you can even go and meet him. Ryuju just stared at the boy, not being able to make up her mind if he was telling the truth or not. So what? You expect me to believe that you know Sanji and just happened to run into his family at the moment you were dying? This event is clearly orchestrated. Nah, I'm just lucky like that. You won't believe the amount of uncanny luck I have. Sure you do, Ryuju intoned sarcastically. Luffy sighed. So what do you want to do? What can I possibly say to prove to you that I'm not some spy? What would I even have to gain by doing this to you? I just told you your brother is alive and asked for a ride out. You can cage me and keep me locked up or sedated or whatever the hell you want, as long as I get to leave this place. I got things to do and can't be stuck in this stupid place. I don't know your goals or motives, and that's what makes you dangerous. Luffy whined and pouted. I already told you my goal. I want to leave this place. Don't concentrate on his cute pouting face. Ryuju berated herself when her thoughts again got occupied with thinking of how cute it looked. You could be a spy sent by the world government to confirm Sanji's existence and then blackmail the Germa, saying you will kill him if we didn't obey you. Luffy gave her a deadpan look. Really? Will the others really give a shit about him? So just me then. Ryuju growled. You think I'm kind, so you think you can blackmail me into doing things for you? To her surprise, Luffy gave her a shit-eating grin. Well, for that, you'll first have to acknowledge you're kind, which you vehemently refused to do so. So even if I was a world government spy like you say I am, and the Sanji I know is in fact your brother, you don't care, do you? So, I have nothing to blackmail you with. Shishishishi. Ryuju sat there stunned by his logic. He had somehow used her own words against her in a manner she had never imagined before. She was a master interrogator who had extracted information from all kinds of people, but she had just lost a battle of logic with a boy who wasn't even 17 yet. Luffy couldn't hold back and just laughed out loud, seeing her gobsmacked expression, which only pissed her off, and she smacked him hard on the head, cutting his laughter off. Hey, I thought we were having a battle of wits here. Luffy whined, rubbing his head. That only further confused her as she realized that he honestly thought that they were playing a game. She had absolutely no idea what to make of him and just sat there wondering if she should believe him or not. She let out a deep sigh, clearing her mind of all her thoughts, and began processing what all he had said from the beginning with a clean slate. She thought for a while before asking, okay, let's assume that you did see this person who looks like Sanji. How come you remember him so well? If it was just another random person you hadn't even talked to, how can you recall everything about him to the point of even remembering which direction his eyebrows curled? He's not some random person, he's a part of my crew. Huh, he's my cook. Wait, what? Ryuju was once again gobsmacked. Her brother was a pirate now, and follows this boy as his cook. Before she could think more about it, she soon found a chink in his story and internally smiled, finally catching him in a lie. He's a part of your pirate crew, is he? Ryuju asked, holding back a smug smile. Yep, you just messed up. Just now, you said that he's a part of your supposed pirate crew. Ryuju paused, giving a smug grin. But earlier, you said you hadn't even talked to him yet. So how come he joined your crew without even talking to you? You're clearly lying. Oh, I haven't asked him yet, Luffy answered unperturbed. I won't ask anyone to join my crew until I officially set out at 17, but I'm always on the lookout for potential people. I saw Sanji beating up a customer because they had wasted food by throwing it on the floor, and he also gave some food to a poor starving guy who didn't have any money. When I saw that, I decided that he's gonna be my cook. He's a good person, knows the value of food, apparently makes delicious food, and also knows how to fight. I'll ask him when I set out and convince him to join my crew. I've already decided that he's gonna be a part of my crew. He just doesn't know it yet. Luffy finished his explanation with a huge smile. What kind of selfish bullshit is that? You can't just decide that without even meeting him, you idiot. Ryuju raged, losing her composure uncharacteristically. Luffy quickly cut in before she could rage further. I'm not deciding it for him. I said I'll convince him to join. If he really doesn't want to, then I'll give up, but if not, then I'll make him join me. Ryuju was dumbfounded by all his statements, and for the umpteenth time that night, she sat in her chair speechless. She just couldn't get a read on the boy at all and couldn't determine if he was a spy or just a random boy who happened to know Sanji and luckily met her while he was dying. Not to mention the fact his selfish claims and carefree attitude as if this was all just a big game to him was throwing her off. She sighed deeply. I can't decide if you're a spy or just a delusional lucky idiot. Well, what would you do for each case? What? If you decide I was a spy, what will you do? If you decide I'm being truthful, what will you do? Torture you for information for the first case? For the second case, I guess I can leave you on some island we stop at. Luffy hummed in acknowledgement, knowing she had the power to decide his fate now. Same question right back at you, Ryuju said, staring at him. What will you do if I decide to kill you? Fight you, of course, Luffy answered immediately. I can't die here. And what makes you think you can defeat and kill me? I'm not gonna kill you. Neither do I have to defeat you. I just have to escape from here. You're bound by chains. I'll figure out a way. Ryuju sighed, shaking her head. You're delusional. She was really mentally tired. She had had a very long, tiring day at the Reverie, and immediately after she had rescued Luffy, she had spent some time patching him up. Then she had waited for him to gain consciousness, all the while wondering why he had mentioned Sanji's name, how he knew him, and making up all sorts of theories of who he could be. And after he woke up, she had this very confusing conversation with him where she couldn't get a read on him and was now completely mentally tired. And on top of all this, she had to spend the next day again at the Reverie. She saw that the time was already 2:30, so decided to postpone the conversation with Luffy. He wasn't going anywhere if she gave him specific poisons, and she would make sure he was paralyzed, so even if someone somehow did enter her lab, which was already a hard task, he couldn't talk or exchange any information. She stood up and saw that Luffy was watching her carefully while being highly on guard. She wondered if he really thought he could escape from her while being so injured and chained. She was going on another thought spiral about his strangeness again, so quickly shook her thoughts away and walked to the cabinet to get the paralyzing and sleeping agents. Luffy watched silently as she picked a couple of things, came up to him, pulled his arm and injected a couple of liquids into him, all the while eyeing him curiously. Not afraid these will kill you? Nah, you don't want to kill me. I could just be pretending to be injecting you with some sleeping agents. This could very well be poisons. Luffy stared at her face for a while and said, I'll choose to trust you. You're kind. Ryuju scoffed. You're just appealing to my humanity. I am. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. And I really can't die here. The two held each other's gazes for a few moments before Luffy smiled and reiterated, I'll trust you, before he slumped down unconscious into her arms. Ryuju sighed at the optimistic idiot and lifted him off the ground. She opened a cabinet in which she usually kept highly volatile chemicals, threw him inside and locked it. On top of the paralyzing and sleeping agents, she had also put him in a highly secure cabinet, so there was no way he could talk to anyone on the outside. Luffy was just talking to Ryuju before his world blanked out, and the next instant he was opening his eyes to a differently dressed Ryuju with a sack of food in her hand, which he immediately lunged for and started devouring. He didn't know what happened and wanted to ask how he seemingly skipped time, but he was more interested in eating first. While eating, he noticed that she seemed to be extremely tired for some reason as she sagged in her chair. You okay? He asked in between gulps, and she lifted her head in surprise. After she had locked him in the lab the previous night, Ryuju had gone to sleep but couldn't sleep much as her head was going through all that Luffy had said. She was half convinced that he was in fact talking about her Sanji itself, and was glad to find that he was alive. And the more she thought about the conversation, the more she believed that he was just an idiotic, delusional boy and not some spy. The other half, however, was making up all sorts of speculations on who Luffy could be and whether he was here to gather some sort of information on her. She had spent the entire night thinking of what any faction could gain from Sanji being alive and telling it to her, but apart from holding him hostage and blackmailing her, she couldn't come up with anything else. She couldn't sleep a wink all night, and before she knew it, it was morning already and she had to go to the castle again. After a morning meeting with her family where Judge relayed what all had happened during the previous day, she had gone back to the castle to meet with all the horrible nobles again. Fortunately, the idiot prince who was trying to court her the previous day had found someone else and wasn't behind her anymore, so at least that was a silver lining. But then the noon party where she was swarmed by other elitist princes and princesses while she had to act like an elitist noble too had tired her out. As soon as evening arrived and people were free to leave without it seeming rude, it was socially acceptable to not attend the night party as people usually hooked up, she excused herself to go back to the lab. Her brothers asked her to accompany them to the pit again, but she just said that she had found an interesting slave on whom poisons worked differently and she was returning early to run tests, and they relented. She wanted nothing more than to soak in a hot bath and sleep until the next morning, but she also badly wanted to interrogate Luffy further and decide if he was a spy or not. Thus, she was here in her lab, not forgetting to bring enough food on her way, watching him eat with disgust. You okay? Luffy asked again, now pausing and staring at her when she didn't answer. Yeah, she dismissively waved it off with a tired sigh. That bad of a day, huh? Luffy looked at her with pity and with great reluctance offered her the piece of meat he was holding. Here, you can have some of my meat if you want. Ryuju just stared at him dumbfounded. You do realize that I brought the food to you, right? So, I'm eating it, so it's mine. And I'm sharing. Here, eat up. Meat always cheers people up, he said, shoving the shank of meat as far as he could considering he was chained up. No, thank you. I already ate. You're lost. Luffy shrugged and went back to devouring the food while Ryuju watched with bewilderment. What's wrong with this idiot? Luffy finished and clapped his hands in happiness. Thank you for the food. He then looked at her and asked something that was bugging him. What did you give me last night? One moment I was seeing you and the next I see a day has already passed. I don't even feel like I slept. It's almost like I time skipped. It's a special sleeping and paralyzing agent I concocted. It deprives all your senses as soon as it enters your bloodstream and you won't even feel anything until I inject you with the antidote. You won't even realize you had fallen unconscious or how much time has passed. I use it as a torture method when I'm pressed for time. I inject a person with this, change the date and time on the clock, change my dress, and then wake the person up. I do it enough times and I can make the person think that weeks or months have passed when not even a week would have actually passed. Well, that's kinda neat. It's like a sensory deprivation tank but with just injections, huh? Cool. Ryuju grew a tick mark on her head as she was hoping to scare him by saying that, but he only got excited, remarked it was cool and was completely unfazed by it. She realized that she was going to get a massive migraine if she tried analyzing this boy, and was starting to realize that Luffy was an enigma no one could solve. Enough about that, Ryuju grumbled, annoyed. Let's get back to the conversation. Tell me about yourself. Is this a job interview? Luffy deadpanned with an unimpressed gaze. Ask a better question. She felt like snapping his neck and be done with him as he was really treating this like a game, but held herself back and breathed out slowly before asking, what's with the hat? She watched in glee when she saw him flinch slightly and a smug smile spread across her face. Don't think I haven't noticed that the first thing you did upon gaining consciousness each time was discreetly glance at that hat. She had seen him do this discreetly every time she had woken him up, and had even checked the hat when he was asleep, but didn't find anything special about it. It was just a simple straw hat. Luffy sighed as he ran his fingers through his hair. Well yeah, should have expected you to catch me, huh? The slavers never caught me, so I thought I could fool you too. What do you mean? That hat is my greatest treasure. When I was initially caught, I realized that they were trying to see if I had any weaknesses, and I knew that if they ever knew how much I cared about my hat, they would definitely use it against me. So, I acted very casual about it and never once let it slip that it was anything important. I just let it be in my cage if they ever dragged me out and kept it out of sight as much as I could, and thus, it's here with me now. Ryuju had gotten up and grabbed the hat while he explained and was studying it carefully, seeing if she had missed anything. What's so special about it? She asked, twirling it. It represents a promise. I promised the man that gave me this hat that I would become a great pirate, recruit the greatest crew ever, and after reaching the top, return it to him, he said, reaching out for it. I see. So, a sentimental treasure then. She nodded and handed it to him. She could take it back any time she wanted, so didn't mind giving it to him. She watched as Luffy's face split into an impossibly huge D-shaped grin as he put the hat on his head, and even she felt that the hat belonged on his head. Thanks. Anyway, we're at a sort of impasse here. You say you saw someone that looked like Sanji, and I say that Sanji is dead. Yeah, so what else can you give me? What? What else can you give me so that I don't see saving you as a total waste of time? I've already saved you, so I might as well use you as my own slave. I'm nobody's slave, Luffy answered instantly. Well, you don't have a choice, do you? I hold your life in my hands after all. I can use you any way I want. Luffy knew it was all an act as she really wasn't cruel, so just shrugged and said, I don't mind helping you with things. What do you want me to do? Ryuju wanted to really get back at him as he was partly responsible for her bad mood, so she decided to make him fluster. Lick my feet. She drawled suggestively, sticking out one of her legs towards him, which was completely bare as she was wearing a very short dress shirt. Luffy was sitting on the floor with his back to a desk to which he was chained to, and she was in a sofa chair directly opposite him, so her stretched out leg was almost on him and he got a very clear view of everything. In Ryuju's mind, he was going to blush profusely, stutter, gulp, avert his eyes but also steal secret glances, and altogether become very flustered, after which she would reveal it to be a joke and ask him if he really expected something like that to happen, and she could tease him about it relentlessly. He was still a boy after all, and boys his age were very interested in the opposite sex. And not to seem egotistical, she knew she was insanely and sensually hot, so of course she expected him to get flustered. She really wanted to get back at him as he was partly responsible for the bad mood she had been in since the previous day, and thus tried to make him flustered. But reality turned out to be different. I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in you. Luffy responded with an honest apologetic expression. I guess you're hot, but I don't care. I don't have a foot or leg fetish either. Ryuju awkwardly kept her leg up for a couple of seconds as the two stared into each other's eyes, before she slowly retreated it back without a word. There was a very light pink hue sporting her cheeks due to embarrassment as her plan had backfired. She had never done something like this and had just done this on a whim so that she could see him getting flustered and tease him about it. But the big honest eyes, no hint of a blush, genuine apologetic expression made her feel like a pervert, and she chose to forget that this event ever happened. I was just kidding, she mumbled softly, knowing it sounded like a lame excuse now. Sure, Luffy answered nonchalantly, which only made her more flustered. And much to her further embarrassment, he added, I can kiss you though. I'm pretty great at kissing if I do say so myself, and I don't mind kissing anyone. She coughed a couple of times before quickly changing the topic, as so how did you get caught anyway? Luffy gave an internal sigh of relief before answering. I dozed off while fishing near my island, and when I woke up, I couldn't see my island anywhere. 2 days of random rowing. I finally found a ship and rocketed myself there. I ate some food they gave me, and the next time I woke up, I was in a sea stone cage and cuffs. Wait, you rocketed yourself? That's what I call when I slingshot myself over distances. Right, rubber fruit. Yep, okay, continue. That's all, I guess. I was enslaved for a few months, and a few days ago, they got tired of me and finally threw me out after poisoning me. Tired of you? Who got tired of you? The slavers. You weren't sold to anyone. Nope. Why? I was stubborn, I guess. I didn't obey them whenever they asked me to do something. And after a couple of escape attempts, they got fed up with me, poisoned me, and threw me away. You're saying you basically irritated them so much that they threw you out? I guess it could be seen that way, yeah. Shishishishi. Ryuju blinked in honest bewilderment. Somehow I can actually see that. I've met you just yesterday, and you've managed to irritate me unlike no one ever. Man, those poor slavers. Having to deal with you for months. You're mean. Luffy pouted. Again with the cute pouting. Does he know how cute it is? Is he doing it on purpose? Is this a tactic? Ryuju berated herself again and brought her thoughts back to sensible matters. She knew he wasn't telling her everything. The wound she had seen on him had been awful, so the casual way he had said it was him obviously downplaying it. She didn't press further though, as it was probably a lot of bad memories. Okay, how about before you got caught? Where did you live? I'm from Dawn Island in East Blue. If I remember correctly. That's where the Goa Kingdom is, right? Cleanest kingdom in East Blue. Luffy's face scrunched up in disgust. The place is only clean because they throw out all the trash outside the kingdom in the Great Terminal. I see. So it's like that, huh? Ryuju nodded. A lot of countries did that actually, and it was nothing new. Ryuju asked a few more questions, and Luffy answered truthfully before the topic of Shanks came up. Ryuju had asked why he wanted to become the Pirate King, and with bubbling excitement, Luffy started telling her all about Shanks, how he had met Shanks, how they had hung out together, how he had accidentally eaten his devil fruit, all the stupid and idiotic stuff he did to get on his ship, which had Ryuju giggling, how Shanks had saved his life, and he finished the story with the promise they had made on the hat. By Shanks, you don't mean red-haired Shanks, do you? Ryuju asked as Luffy completed his story. Yep, the same. He's pretty famous now, huh? I heard he's a Yonko. Ryuju was astonished. This boy had a connection with one of the pirate emperors, and on top of that, he had made a promise with the emperor that he would surpass him and take the title of Pirate King. It didn't seem like he was lying. The excitedly animated way he had told his story of how he spent his time with Shanks and his crew was all too real. Luffy was surprisingly a good and engaging storyteller. The only flaw, if it can even be called as such, was he would sometimes name-drop certain people as if expecting the other person to already know who that was. But as he goes on with his narration, it became apparent. For example, he had casually mentioned someone named Makino with no context, but it became apparent later in the story that she was the owner of the bar they hung out in. She was also astonished that Shanks was such a childish person. She had heard of Shanks, of course, but it was only of how he had caused some big incidents and how ruthless and strong he was. But the Shanks in Luffy's story was completely different. Are you sure that that's the same Shanks? He seems so childish from your stories, but he's a powerful and ruthless Yonko, you know. Shishishishi, yeah, he's childish, alright. One of my friends even said that that's the cute side of him. Luffy smiled, reminiscing the time Yuta had called Shanks' childishness his cute side. Cute? Ryuju asked, bewildered. Now I'm sure we're not thinking of the same Shanks. Red hair, 3 scars over his left eye, 1 arm. Luffy's mood deflated a bit. Yeah, I'm the one responsible for the arm. He lost it when he saved my life. Oh, Luffy bounced back quick though, but that's why I promised him. I'll create a crew greater than his and surpass him. I see. Ryuju smiled. He saved your life, giving up one of his arms in the process, and also indirectly gave you a devil fruit. No wonder you're so adamant. You must feel that you can't just disappoint him. Yeah, I don't mind dying while chasing my dream. But I hadn't even set out on my journey yet, and I refused to die before that. Only after I become the Pirate King, the freest man on the seas, will I be satisfied. I see. Freest man on the seas, huh? Sounds wonderful. Ryuju couldn't help but smile at that. She was even more astonished that Shanks was such a good person. She wondered if they were different people too, but then again, she knew nothing personal about Shanks, and the newspapers did embellish a lot when it came to pirates. Giving up his arm to save a random 7-year-old boy and then also acknowledging his dream. Did he see something special in this boy, or is he such a good person to everyone? She wondered. So, he's the reason why Luffy has such a good impression of pirates. Luffy went on to tell more stories about Shanks and his crew. of all the stupid things he did to get Shanks to accept him and his crew, and all the crazy stories they used to tell him and the amazing songs they used to sing at the bar. Ryuju couldn't help but ask follow-up questions and have an engaging conversation with him. Without even realizing it, she was smiling or laughing the whole time at something she hadn't done in a long time. They talked well into the night, bouncing questions off of each other and having a grand old time. It was well after midnight that Ryuju even realized that she was supposed to be interrogating him. She had actually planned to make him talk about his own life and see if she could find any holes or chinks in his story that could reveal he was a spy. But once the topic of Shanks came up and Luffy started telling her stories, she had forgotten all about it. She herself kept asking more questions about Shanks and his crew and listened with interest to whatever Luffy had to say. She couldn't believe how the interrogation had turned into a storytelling session, but honestly, she had had a lot of fun. She never knew conversations could even be this fun, and Luffy knew how to have an engaging conversation. He didn't make it one-sided either and involved her any chance he got, which only made it more fun. Once she realized that, though, she decided to end the conversation then. Her bad mood had actually subsided. In fact, she was feeling refreshed now, and she just wanted to take a nice nap now. She got up, stretching a bit, and went to inject him with the sleeping agents again. "Can't you just paralyze me?" Luffy whined. "I feel like I'm skipping in time and I don't have any time to think. I need to sort out a lot of things in my mind." "No, Mayday." Luffy pouted. Again with the pouting. Ryuju sighed. "Will you stop with the pouting already? What are you, a child? Then stop being so mean." Luffy shot back. "Ugh. What do you even need to think about? How to escape and get in contact with whoever you're working for?" Luffy just rolled his eyes, but then thinking of something, gave a shit-eating grin to her which alarmed Ryuju. "Well," he drawled mischievously, "I need to think about how to not become a sex slave to a pervert like you. You already asked me to lick your feet. Who knows? You might start asking me to suck your toes next. Then your boobs, then why?" Ryuju quickly injected him with the agents before he could finish his sentence, and she watched him slump down with a small blush on her face. "Why the hell did I even say that in the first place?" She groaned in embarrassment. She stared at the grinning face he still had even though he was unconscious and smacked him once, feeling irritated. She sighed as she knew it was her own fault, and after locking him up, went back to bed, feeling kinda refreshed. By this time, she was 80% sure he was just a normal random boy and not some spy. The reason she even suspected that he could actually be a spy in the first place was because of the fearless way he talked and how he treated everything like a game. But by now, she had realized that that was just his personality. The excited way he had talked about his childhood was all too real, and unless he was a masterful actor, she was sure he was just a lucky idiot. And even if he was a masterful spy, she had made sure not to ask anything about Sanji, as if she didn't care about it at all. So he should also think that she in fact didn't care about him one bit and actually thought he was dead. She decided to be the same and never ask about Sanji again, and if the guy Luffy knew really was her Sanji, then she was happy that he was still alive somewhere, and she didn't even want to know where exactly he was so that she could stay out of his life forever. If it was just some random look-alike, then she didn't care about it anyway. She decided to think about what to do with Luffy the next day and went to sleep. She honestly had enjoyed the night with him and wondered if this was what talking with friends was like. She never really had any friends before, as any nobles she met were too haughty and after her power, and the people she did like back in the kingdom worked for her, so they mostly treated her like a master. The people working under her in Germa weren't bad, but she could never call them as her friends. She also never had someone tease her like Luffy had either, and if she was being completely honest with herself, she liked the teasing. Felt like he was treating her as an equal instead of some princess. Luffy blinked and saw a differently dressed Ryuju, seemingly having no feeling of having slept, and groaned in annoyance. He needed time to sort out all the memories and think about what he needed to do, but Ryuju was not even giving him a chance to think. He actually felt like he was skipping time, and the only way he even got some time to himself was when he went to the restroom, but he would get at most 10 minutes before Ryuju started banging on the door, so he didn't even get a chance then. He grabbed the sack of meat which Ryuju had brought and grumbled while eating. "The hell are you grumbling about?" Ryuju asked when she noticed his dissatisfied expression. "Nothing," Luffy sighed and finished eating quickly. "So what are we doing tonight?" Ryuju just stared at him for a few moments before sighing. "I took a step back and reviewed what all we talked about since the beginning." "Okay, and I have to say that you're strange." Luffy tilted his head confused. Okay. Ryuju sighed again before explaining. "I mean, all you did since the beginning was tell me about someone who you thought was Sanji, and thought that you could exchange information about him in return for me saving your life. Your words and actions were definitely suspicious, but I realized yesterday after you told all those stories from your childhood that you're just plain weird." She had thought about it the whole day while she was at the castle and had finally made up her mind that he wasn't a spy. And even on the off chance that he was a spy, then he had absolutely nothing on her and she would still be wary enough of him to not divulge anything that would put her at risk in the future. She still had one last test though, which she would enact tonight to confirm his innocence. Luffy cheered internally finally. You're just an idiot. A lucky one sure, but just an idiot. Stop being mean. Luffy whined with a slight pout. And a child for pouting like that every damn time. Luffy sucked in his lips to stop his pout, which only made the situation more funnier and caused Ryuju to let out a giggle. Seeing her giggle though, Luffy wanted to tease her back, so with a shit-eating grin, he opened his mouth again. Well, if I'm a child, then what are you who asked the child to lick her feet? Ryuju smacked him hard before he could even finish the sentence. You bring that up one more time and I'll actually kill you. Shishishishi, okay, Luffy chuckled, rubbing his head. So what now? I still haven't received anything from you for saving your life. What do you want? I don't have much to give you right now, but you can put it on my tab. I'll give you anything you want once I become the Pirate King. Didn't you also swindle the poor barmaid from your stories with the same promise? Ryuju teased. Hey, I will pay up my tab with Makino. Luffy protested. Sure you will. Luffy just shrugged and thought about what he could give her. You can use me as a guinea pig for testing poisons, he suggested. Ryuju blinked in surprise. Really? As long as I get to leave this place and you drop me off on some island, I'll do anything, he said resolutely, but then added, anything non-sexual. Don't push it, Ryuju warned, but then thought about his offer. You don't understand. I have tons of poisons I want to test which can make a person feel all sorts of things like burning, freezing, give seizures, and a whole lot of pain. I don't mind. It will help train my endurance. Wow, you really are crazy. How do you usually test your poisons? Oh, we have lots of enemies. So I run into tons of people all the time who are out to kill me or my family, so there's no shortage of guinea pigs. Oh, well, that's back at the kingdom. I currently don't have anyone to test poisons on. Great then, I'll be your guinea pig. Ryuju got a manic glint in her eye, already thinking of all the experiments she had held off on as she didn't have anyone to test it on. Okay then, I'll tell you where you'll get dropped off after the reverie is done. What day of the reverie is it? Today was the 5th. 2 more days to go. Luffy hummed in acknowledgement. What's the deal with the death pit anyway? I mean, this is supposed to be just a meeting, right? Why is there even a death pit here in the first place? Ryuju sighed and explained about the family of royals that was beaten and thrown in the death pit and how it was an unspoken threat by the WG to all the attending kingdoms. They really are bastards, huh? Luffy said after she finished the story. Can't wait to take them all down one day. Huh, what did you just say? Luffy just shrugged. Forget it. No, tell me now. Who are you gonna take down? The celestial dragons, Luffy said with a sigh. That just made Ryuju laugh out loud. Haha, the audacity of saying that right here in Mariewa. Wow, you sure are pretty stupid after all. Luffy didn't comment anything. He would either directly or indirectly take them down one day. Either him becoming the Pirate King will lead to their downfall somehow, or Dragon will succeed in dethroning them. Didn't know I even had a dad. And he's a pretty big deal in the world, huh? And Sabo is with him right now. Sabo, I want to meet him so bad. And Sabo wants to take down the celestial dragons too. So of course that dream of his will come true. Before he could think further, Ryuju interrupted him again, and he sighed internally in annoyance. This kept happening since he had been rescued and he didn't get any time to think at all. Don't say that ever out loud, okay? The celestial dragons are the gods of this world. They need to be respected. Luffy just gave her a deadpan look. He knew she was saying that because she had to keep up the facade of being an elitist royal herself, so didn't comment anything. Well anyway, Ryuju got up stretching. Imago hit the sack. You will be here locked in this room itself. See you tomorrow. Luffy gawked at her in surprise when she started making her way towards the door. You're not gonna put me to sleep. Yeah, now that I've confirmed you're not some spy, I don't think there's a need to. She then glanced back at him. Is there? No, Luffy hastily and happily answered. I finally get time to think. Thanks. She rolled her eyes before saying, don't touch my chemicals. Sure. Ryuju then locked the lab, went back to her room and turned on a visual transponder snail that was connected to a snail inside the lab. She had hid the snail inside a bookshelf such that Luffy wouldn't be able to see it, and since he was chained, he wouldn't even get anywhere near it to find out about it. The snail had a perfect view of the spot where he was chained up, so she could watch his every action. She wanted to see what he would do if he was alone, and this was the last test she had thought of. And thus she laid down in her bed as the snail projected whatever was happening inside the lab, and she observed what Luffy did throughout the entire night. Luffy finally had some alone time. When he was in the pit waiting for Ryuju to show up for 6 long agonizing hours, he had kept his mind blank so that he could save every ounce of his energy, so he hadn't thought of anything. This was the first time he got some time to actually think. He leaned back against the desk, crossed his arms, and started going through everything. The first thing was what had happened when he had come back to life. After he had lost consciousness in the soul plane, he had found himself in a blank space again. But this time it felt more familiar. like he was in his own body instead of the almost weightless feeling he had felt when he was in the soul plane. He didn't have time to ponder where he was because he spotted a whitish spiral cloud moving away from him. He didn't know why, but he felt that it shouldn't be separated from him, and so had instinctively reached out and grabbed it before it could move any further away from him, and the white cloud actually seemed to jump in surprise. The cloud had then coiled around his arm like a snake, and one tail end of it actually came right up to his face as if studying him carefully. He didn't know what the hell was happening, but the whitish cloud seemed familiar, as if it was a friend he had had his whole life. The whitish cloud studying his face actually seemed to be swaying in happiness before it coiled around his chest, and he soon found himself opening his eyes and saw the death pit. He had put off thinking about what the hell that was, but now that he had time, that was the first thing he wanted to process, and tried feeling for the white cloud again. He already had a theory as to what it was. The familiar feeling from the white cloud was what he felt when he had first eaten his devil fruit and had been with him ever since. Yes, it was probably his devil fruit essence. It was unbinding itself from his soul as he had died and was leaving him, but when he came back to life and inhabited his own body again, he had yanked it back to himself just in time, and the essence had binded itself back to him again. Phew, almost lost my devil fruit, huh? He tried to feel for that again or go back to whatever that blank space was, probably my mindscape, Luffy concluded, but he couldn't, so he gave up on figuring it out for now. Then his thoughts wandered to his devil fruit itself. It wasn't just a paramecia-type gum fruit, but also a mythical Zoan fruit, and that too the sun god Nika. What the hell? It felt like everything he knew about his fruit was false. And who the hell was Nika anyway? Sengoku had the mythical Zoan, model Buddha, which gave him the powers of Buddha, who was a historical figure in Leo's world. But Luffy had never heard about Buddha in this life. But then again, he wasn't much of a reader or someone who cared about history that much, so he probably just didn't know. So his fruit was also based on a historical figure. His fruit gave him the powers of a guy called Nika, who was a warrior of liberation, also known as Joy Boy. Was that Joy Boy? Or was he Joy Boy? Was it a title? Was it another name for Nika? Or anyone that ate his fruit is known as Joy Boy? So many questions. The power of his fruit was described as the most ridiculous power in history and could do anything the user imagined. He started grinning when he remembered the literally comical way his body had worked when he was in his awakened form in the battle against Kaido, and couldn't wait to unlock it himself. If anything he could imagine could be made reality. He started getting excited thinking of all the ways he could actually use it. He stopped himself as that was still far into the future and he had to awaken his fruit first. But still, it wasn't just a simple fruit, huh? It was a paramecia-type fruit, but its awakened form was a mythical Zoan. Or was it always a mythical Zoan, but the powers actually unlocked when he awakened it? He was sure there was more explanation to what type his fruit actually was in future chapters, but he had to find out on his own here, which he was more than happy for. Then, to take a step back, came his gears. He actually had a vague idea of inflating his bones and muscles to become a giant in his childhood years, but when he had tried it, his body felt like it would pop, so he hadn't achieved it. But he had thought that he could do it once his body got stronger, and looks like it actually did work. Gear 2 and 3 were amazing to say the least, and Gear 4 with all its variations along with Haki was super powerful. Then his mind wandered to Haki and its 3 forms, to think there was something that strong waiting to be unlocked. He was awed by it and couldn't wait to unlock everything. He had already unlocked Conquerors while saving Kel, and he also realized that Ace had unlocked his during their childhood years when they were fighting against the Blue Gem Pirates. He also realized why the Fist of Love hurt now. Stupid Gramps was using armament to hit me. Then came the techniques the CP9 agents used, which had made Story Luffy acknowledge that a human body could even be trained to be that strong. The Rokushiki techniques were amazing to say the least, and he realized that Gramps used Zoro all the time when he was chasing them in the forest. Ace, Sabo, and him had even discussed how he seemingly teleported from one place to another. The result of the discussion was, of course, because Gramps is a monster. He had also seen his grandpa using Jeppu when he was tied up to balloons and got swept too far away by the winds. Gramps would just show up in the sky somehow, which had shocked Luffy the first time he had seen it, but again had just chalked it up to his Gramps being a monster. He cursed his grandpa for not teaching him and his brothers all this, as it would have made them so much stronger. Luffy stopped himself from going down a rabbit hole of thinking about battle techniques and started thinking about the world itself. Void Century, the Great Kingdom, the ancient weapons, the silhouettes in Florian Triangle, and so many more mysteries. And not to forget the space pirates on the fucking moon. Like, what the hell? There are aliens there right now, and they are pirates. That's so fucking cool. He didn't really care for history before he died, but one of the biggest selling points of the One Piece manga were all the mysteries Oda had sprinkled in throughout the story. And Leo was extremely interested in the deep lore and history of this world. So now, he couldn't help but be interested too. He actually loved that he could understand these things now and could appreciate just how rich and wonderful this world was. He thought about islands all the way up in the sky to islands all the way deep under the sea and couldn't help but vibrate in excitement. Being from East Blue, he had no idea that his world was so wonderful, exciting, dangerous, and thrilling. He couldn't wait to actually go to these places and see them in real life, as just seeing them on a screen was obviously nowhere near as exciting as it would be in real life. He was peeved that this wouldn't all be a surprise for him though. Now, his thoughts finally turned to his own personal adventure. Did he want to go through the same adventure as what was shown in the story? Could he actually pick a completely different route on the Grand Line and have an entirely new adventure? The answer was an instant and a 100% no. He couldn't in good conscience leave any single person he knew from the story in trouble. If he did anything like that, it would eat him up from the inside and he would break down eventually. He imagined a single scenario of him not choosing to go to Whiskey Peak and in turn not go to Alabasta. Vivi would certainly die at Whiskey Peak itself at the hands of Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine. And there would soon be a headline of Hero Crocodile saves the country of Alabasta from its corrupt king. If he actually picked a different path and read something like that in the newspapers, he would surely die of guilt and shame. So, I'm gonna be having the same adventure as my story counterpart, he thought with a sigh, but quickly shelved the topic for now. He would think of what to do when he actually was on the journey and see how it played out. For now, he needed to think of how to get back to Dawn Island, and what he needed to do before that. He was too late in the timeline to actually save anyone in any meaningful way by ridding their tragedies before they could happen. Hyuna was already dead. Bellamere was already dead and Kakoyashi was under Arlong's rule. Banshina was dead. And so on. And in the present time, all his crew and friends were physically and relatively safe. But still some of them were in a lot of pain. His mind started wandering to Nami, to Brooke, to Vivi, to Robin, to Yamato, to Canis, to Asa, to Rebecca, to Shirahoshi, to Momo, to Ace, to Kairos, to Viola. And all their backstories suddenly started playing in his mind all at once. And when his mind reached Otoko, all the people in Wano starving and suffering because of Kaido and the smile fruits, tears started pouring from his eyes as his heart clenched. Atama had called him Aniki and saw him as a brother, and she was currently probably all alone and hungry. He remembered the scene of her selling the hats she made with her own hands with a bright happy smile while she starved. And he cried as he couldn't do anything for her currently. He didn't care about many people and didn't see himself as a savior or a hero, but he wanted the people he knew to be well fed and happy. He didn't know what was happening, but all the sad stories started surfacing to the top of his mind, and he started banging his head on the ground to make the pain stop. He took a few deep sighs and tried to calm his nerves down, but it wasn't just his emotions that were running wild, but Leo's memories were also affecting him. Leo had seen all these scenes as just a fictional story and had felt extremely bad for all the characters. But now that those memories were his and Luffy kinda saw the world from Leo's point of view, he couldn't help but be horrified that all those animated and fictional characters that went through hell were in fact real. The strongest and strangest emotion Luffy felt was actually his own tragedy. Leo was devastated when Ace had died, but he had been much more devastated when he saw Story Luffy dealing with Ace's death on Amazon Lily. Leo and Serena both had bawled their eyes out watching Story Luffy bang his head and scream his lungs out for Ace after the Marineford War. And Luffy now saw himself crying and experiencing all that as if he was a different person and felt all the emotions Leo felt. And adding to that, now Luffy, through Leo's frame of reference, realized that Luffy was a real person and felt strong emotions towards Luffy, which was he himself. It was an incredibly jumbled and messed up point of view which made absolutely no sense, and his mind became even more chaotic. He started banging his head on the ground harder to make it all stop, and soon he didn't know if he was Luffy or Leo. Was Serena here? Was Ace here? Was this a fictional universe? Was he a comic book character? Was he Leo in an acid trip imagining about being Luffy? Haha, that was so funny. Yosh, I'll go become the Pirate King. No, wait, he already did. Was he Luffy dealing with Ace's death? What? Ace is dead. Serena is dead too. Is Nami okay? Is David gonna be fine without me now that I'm dead? Is Otama fed? Did I give her food? Wait, I'm dead. Leo's dead, not me. I'm Luffy. Is Robin safe? Brooke is not alone anymore, right? I saved them all, didn't I? No, I haven't even started my journey. I died before I even started my music career. Music career? What has music got anything to do with saving them? Because pirates gotta see. All his jumbled up thoughts abruptly stopped and he felt his mind suddenly clearing. He stopped banging his head as he slowly breathed in and out and felt his body relaxing. I was afraid this might happen, Luffy heard White's voice saying in his mind. White. He tried to open his mouth but no voice came out as he focused on breathing. This is just a memory I put inside you, so I can't answer you, White's voice giggled, making Luffy smile. That actually made him come back to his senses and he just listened to the message White had left. So, your mind just broke. I had put this message in your head in case this did happen. You have two conflicting memories, which is mostly fine, but the problem here is that the memories were carried on from your soul to your physical body. Just imagine that your body has a brain and your soul has a brain. Both are usually in sync as they both learn and form neural networks at the same time since birth. But in this case, your soul brain, which has a ton of new memories from Leo, just integrated with your body brain. So things will get chaotic and messed up if you start overworking it. Don't think about anything too emotionally triggering for a couple of days and let your body and soul brains integrate and sync with one another, and you'll be fine after that. So this is just temporary, don't worry. I see. Thanks for this. I'm gonna assume you thanked me just now, and so you're welcome. And if you're actually hearing this message, then it probably means you survived. Congratulations. Have fun with life, Luffy. Toodles. And then White's voice was gone. Luffy sighed in relief, knowing that this was just temporary and he wouldn't have any long-term effects because of this. He was wondering why he was fine in the soul plane but was having an identity and memories crisis now, but the soul and physical brain syncing issue explained it. He felt his body was now relaxed, so opened his eyes and saw that the floor had become red with blood. At least he was back to reality now and knew who he was and where he was. Damn, he looked around and thankfully only the spot in front of him was bloody. He touched his forehead and found it was bleeding a lot. He wiped it all off on the bandages on his arm and thought he should clean the blood on the ground up somehow. He looked around for any cloth he could find and he did spot one on the sofa, but he couldn't reach it because he was chained up. He sighed when he didn't find anything else and just used his legs, which was covered in bandages, to wipe the floor. It wasn't clean and his bandages only got dirtier. But he could just explain it as his wounds opening up if Ryuju asked. He sighed again after he was done and sat down, leaning against the desk trying to keep his mind clear. He started humming Yuta's songs to keep his mind relaxed and after a while, drifted off to sleep. Is he sane? Was the first thing Ryuju thought when she arrived the next day morning to check up on him and handed him some food, which he began devouring happily. She had seen the whole breakdown the previous night and wondered just what the hell had happened. It was weird from the beginning itself, as he had just leaned against the desk, crossed his arms and closed his eyes as if reminiscing something. He had started grumbling, then giggling, then grumbling again, rubbing his forehead while mumbling stupid gramps, then vibrating with unparalleled excitement before deflating again. What the hell is he thinking about? Was running through her head, and then the breakdown began. He first started tearing up slightly and wiped them off, but then he started sobbing and then clutching his head in pain before he started banging his head on the ground. He kept mumbling, "Stop. Make it stop," while he kept banging his head, and then even more weird stuff started happening when sometimes giggles and huffs started getting mixed in while he cried, saying incomprehensible stuff. She was about to rush out and go to the lab to make him stop from hurting himself anymore, but then he had somehow brought himself out of that crazed state himself. He had breathed in and out, slowly coming back to his senses, and then finally was himself again. He grimaced at his own head and the blood splattered on the floor, and then like an absolute idiot wiped it all off using the bandages which were wrapped around his limbs. Then he just started humming a song with a small smile before drifting off to sleep. She honestly didn't know what she expected to catch him doing. The most she had imagined was him trying to free himself or try to contact someone using some unknown means. But she had just found him in turmoil. Probably remembering his torture, she concluded logically. "You good?" Luffy asked as he finished his food and noticed a worried look on her face. Yeah, I'm not the one who lost it last night, idiot." Luffy noticed that it was actually morning and thanked her again for thinking of his morning meal too. "Anyway, I gotta get going," she said with a sigh, getting up, interpreting it as her being in a bad mood for having to go to the castle again and mingling with the disgusting nobles. Luffy spoke up. "You know, there's this blue-haired princess called Vivi at the meeting too. She's kind too, just like you, so maybe talk to her." Ryuju blinked in honest surprise. Was this it? Was this his plan all along? Make me talk to the Alabaston princess? But why? What would me talking to her prove? Was he sent by Vivi? Was she trying to communicate something with me? No, that's ridiculous. She could just come up and say something to me if she wanted. Ryuju's distrusting and paranoid side started making all sorts of speculations again. "Just saying, that's all," Luffy continued when she didn't answer. "She was gonna be my second choice if you didn't happen to save me and I got a chance to see her." I see he could be just telling the truth, or this was some elaborate plan. She decided that she would observe and talk to this Vivi and judge for herself what the case was. Luffy spent the entire day either training his body or thinking about what to do. He had slowly processed the thoughts so that he wouldn't lose it, and it had worked as he had come to a few conclusions. First was what had led to the Marineford War, the murder of Thatch. He had seen the date in the newspapers and realized there were still 18 months left before his 17th birthday. The story didn't really explain when exactly Ace had joined Whitebeard, when he had become the 2nd Division commander, and when exactly Teach had killed Thatch. Also didn't explain how long Ace had been looking for Teach before they met in Alabasta, so there was no reference to whether the event had already happened or not. For now, he assumed that it was yet to happen and wondered if he could prevent it altogether. And the answer was a no. For him to go up to the Whitebeard crew and tell them that one of their crew members will kill another crew member would be a one-way ticket to hell for him. He imagined a random boy coming up to him and saying Zoro was going to kill another crewmate. And he didn't have to think for a second of what his response would be. He would punt the boy and dismiss him completely, not even giving what he said a second thought. And the Whitebeard crew were an actual family who called their captain Pops and considered each other as actual brothers. Plus, Teach had been with them for decades. If Whitebeard or any of the crew members actually heard him say that Teach was gonna kill a crewmate and he didn't go out in a body bag, then that crew would be the worst crew ever. So, he couldn't go to any of the Whitebeard crew members. He could only go to Ace, as Ace would believe his words. But would the others believe Ace? It was a resounding no again. They would feel betrayed by Ace that he would even think that about them, and Ace would lose all credibility. So, the last option to prevent the murder was to actually be present on Whitebeard's ship and catch Teach red-handed. That was the only way Thatch's murder could be avoided. Now, the biggest question of how he could achieve this, and he drew an absolute blank. He could get in touch with Ace somehow and have him pick him up from wherever Ryuju would drop him off. But how the fuck was he supposed to contact Ace? He didn't even know if Ace had a transponder snail, let alone the number. He so wished this world had smartphones right about now, which would solve all his problems. He racked his brain about any way he could achieve it. He could call the Marine HQ, get in touch with his Gramps, have him somehow call Ace. If he even had a way. Or Gramps could even get in touch with Whitebeard himself and then to Ace through him. But would that actually work? Would Gramps actually call Whitebeard without Luffy giving any explanations? The answer was again a no. He couldn't depend on his Gramps for this at all. Next would be Dragon. But again, he had no idea how to get in touch with Dragon. I so want a phone. Luffy whined when all his problems ultimately lead to how to get in contact with someone. He decided to ask Ryuju if she had a way, but doubted it too. Other than the Marineford War, there was really no other event that he could prevent or solve right about now with his current level of strength. He could definitely not sail the Grand Line alone, as he would drown without Nami. And his strength also wasn't all that great that he could easily traverse the Grand Line by himself or even hitch rides. If he didn't have strength, then he would obviously get stuck with someone unsavory again and would probably fail. He wasn't strong enough to achieve anything he wanted right now. He wondered just how he was going to go home to East Blue from wherever Ryuju was going to drop him off, but shelved that topic for now, as he would worry about it when he was actually on an island. He sighed in frustration when he realized how utterly and hilariously outclassed he was by opponents in the New World. Even the opponents in Paradise would be too much for his current self. He needed to get strong. Much stronger, and then even more. Ryuju had had a relatively good day. There were plenty of the same shitty stuff as the previous days, but she had kinda made a friend that day. As Luffy had said, she decided to observe and talk to Vivi that day. She had observed the young blue-haired princess for quite a while, and she quickly learned that Vivi was someone who wore her emotions on her sleeve. She was a young girl, so her guards, someone she called Pell and Igaram, had easily warded off any approach from any man trying to woo her. She did have a few friends with whom she would talk the entire time like a chatterbox, and Ryuju had discreetly tried to hear what they were talking about, and she found out that they were just talking about their country's cuisine and culture. After 4 hours of surveillance, Ryuju just couldn't see this young girl as a mastermind of some elaborate plan. Deciding that she had to talk to her to see if there's some bigger conspiracy here, she finally approached her after lunch. After a bit of tension in the initial conversations, Vivi had opened up to her when Ryuju had just straight up told her, "Listen, I just wanted someone who is not an asshole to talk to. I'm tired of all these assholes trying to woo me for the past 5 days. You seemed nice, so I approached you. I have no intention of setting you up with anyone, let alone my brothers. You're too cute for them." Vivi was apprehensive at first when the only princess of the Germa kingdom had approached her, as she was sure the pink-haired princess was here to try to set her up with one of her brothers. Others had already tried that tactic, and whenever someone tried it, she would discreetly signal Pell or Igaram to interrupt them so she could politely escape from the person. But when Ryuju straight up told her that she just wanted someone to talk to as she was tired of all the assholes, such crude language for a princess, she thought, not knowing that the universe was laughing at her, as she would soon be entering Baroque works and she would have to learn all this crude language herself to fit in. She was more than happy to talk to her. The two had spent the better part of the day together and had had a really nice time. The first thing that became obvious to Ryuju was that Vivi loved her country. She would bring up interesting local specialties like food, clothes, and desert animals exclusive to her country. One more thing Ryuju learned was that Vivi was extremely teasable. She would blush at the slightest compliments and would go completely beet red at even the slightly suggestive jokes. Ryuju had a lot of fun that day teasing the blue-haired princess, and by the end, she concluded that this innocent young princess was just that, an innocent young princess. She had seen her talking to the slaves in the death pit once, so maybe Luffy just saw that too and decided she was kind too. There was no bigger conspiracy here. You were right about Vivi. She was easy to talk to and we spent pretty much the entire day together. Today was so less sucky compared to the last few days, was the first thing Ryuju told Luffy as soon as she came to the lab. Shishishishi, that's great. You look happy too. Ryuju then proceeded to tell him some of the conversations that they had had and more importantly how easy it was to tease Vivi. She told him how easily she went beet red at even the slightly sexual topics and just kissing, and all the ways she had made her go red in the face. Luffy got a mischievous glint in his eyes and filed that piece of information for later use. And the two had a good laugh at the poor blue-haired princess's expense that day. You know, I thought that this was some elaborate plan you were cooking up and maybe Vivi was involved somehow. Luffy paused from eating and stared at Ryuju. You're never gonna trust me, huh? Nope. Luffy nodded with a sad smile. Well, okay then. Just gotta break down your walls too. What? Leo. My brother. He said that I'm someone who can break down people's walls really easily and plant myself in their hearts. So, I guess I'll make you like me too. Ryuju blinked in honest bewilderment. How the hell can you say something so cheesy with a straight face? Luffy just shrugged. You get analyzed as much as I have. You can't help but acknowledge things about yourself. Analyzed? You were analyzed. By whom? Leo, Serena, and a bunch more people. They all dissected each and every part of my life, my personality, and had lists of all the bad and good qualities I possess, theories of why I worked the way I worked, a ton of debates of why people like me. He sighed thinking about the thousands of posts people made analyzing his character. It's so fucking embarrassing. Ryuju just sat there not knowing what to say. He was analyzed like a lab specimen? What the hell? Why? They just like me, I guess. Who's they? My brother Leo, his girlfriend Serena. And a ton of their friends. Luffy sighed. Well, anyway, I got some questions to ask. Ryuju wanted to know more about the analyzation topic, but then again, she had no idea what exactly to ask either. If I wanted to get in contact with Giant Awesome. I mean, Whitebeard, how could I? What the hell? You want to get in touch with the Whitebeard? Why? She asked, completely bewildered and caught off guard. Another brother of mine was going to join his crew. I wanted to know if it's already happened or not. Oh, maybe it was in the papers? Is there a new commander for Whitebeard recently? Fire Fist Ace. Ryuju blinked again, completely gobsmacked. Any small doubt she still had of this guy being a spy flew right out the window, as what spy would say something like this? They would usually keep a low profile and collect information about her slowly and build trust. But this guy just straight up told her that he wanted to get in touch with someone massive. Hello? Luffy called out when she didn't answer, and that brought her out of her stupor. Oh no, I don't think I've seen something like that in the papers. Oh. Then I gotta wait until Ace joins his crew. Luffy crossed his arms and began thinking. You really think your brother can just join Whitebeard's crew and become a commander? Ace is strong. He definitely will. Well, after he tries to kill Whitebeard for a while at least. What? Don't worry. Giant Awesome is strong. He won't die by Ace's hands. What? Ryuju was losing her mind, not understanding what this boy was telling her. What the hell are you talking about? Too much to explain. Forget it. Anyway, I still have to get in touch with Ace somehow. Know any means of getting in touch with Giant Awesome? I'll call him after Ace joins. He's Whitebeard, the strongest man in the world. Stop calling him Giant Awesome. And not anyone can just call him, you idiot. Luffy nodded sadly. Yeah, I've been trying to think of ways on how I can get in touch. Ryuju breathed and took a second to calm herself down. This boy was utterly insane was an established fact in her mind now. Why do you want to get in touch with him? I want to get on his ship somehow. But I can't think of any way. Do you know where he is? I know he's somewhere in the New World. Yes, he's in the New World, but no idea where exactly. Luffy nodded. And I don't think I can just traverse the Grand Line with my current level of strength. Ryuju scoffed. You got that right. You'll die in paradise, let alone New World. Yeah. Luffy trailed off with a sigh. I need to get much stronger. Well, at least you recognize you're weak. Ryuju sighed. Can you like? Luffy pointed at chains still binding his arms to the desk. Remove these. You can chain my legs up. I need my hands to train. You want to train now? She asked, bewildered. Your injuries are quite significant, you know. You need to recover first. Don't you see the condition your body's in? It's okay. I heal very fast. Besides, if I want to become the Pirate King, then I should be able to handle this much at least. Well, at least he recognizes that becoming the Pirate King will be hard. Ryuju had given up trying to understand Luffy at this point. She acquiesced to his request and chained him up such that his leg was attached to a chain, but he could walk a few steps away from the desk if he wanted. Thanks. Ryuju just sighed, wondering why she just couldn't say no to him. He was supposed to be a slave, but he didn't show the slightest bit of fear or respect towards her, called her by name as if she was a friend, teased and made fun of her. If it was anyone else in her place, he would have been killed by now. But she didn't hate it either. It was refreshing and new. She just sat in her chair as Luffy first checked where all his wounds were and how significant they were. and after shrugging like an idiot, just started doing push-ups. But his fingers and wrists bones were still broken. She grew irritated and smacked him on the head, making him stop, and he looked at her confused. Why? Your bones and your wrists and fingers are broken, idiot. You need to let it heal first at least. It's okay. I don't feel much pain from it. You take rest right now or I'm injecting you with the sleeping agent again. Luffy slowly crossed his legs while glaring at her with a pout, which looked extremely cute to Ryuju. Now, that's a good boy. She patted his head, which he swatted away, glaring more, which only made her giggle. Luffy grumbled something, but Ryuju didn't care as she was having fun seeing his reactions. Now hush, she said, taking a seat. I need to concoct some stuff. Luffy watched as she began taking all sorts of chemicals from the cabinets and started measuring them out, mixing and heating some liquids in a Bunsen burner. He vaguely remembered performing experiments like this back in school in Leo's memories. But Leo didn't have much interest, so he had mostly forgotten about it. He did remember some chemical reactions and could still name the elements in the periodic table though. Then his mind wandered to element names like californium, americium, europium, and wondered if those elements had the same name here in this world too. Ryuju could feel his curious eyes on her and felt him hovering over her, watching what she was doing intently. She flinched slightly when he brought his face over her shoulder and observed what she was doing. A second later, his head was resting on her shoulder with their cheeks touching, and she didn't know what the hell he was doing. Does he have no concept of personal space? What are you doing? She asked, pausing her experiments. Just watching. I vaguely remember doing stuff like this. It's kind of fun, huh? She just eyed him sideways with a sigh. What I meant was, what are you doing resting your head on my shoulder? Oh, Luffy blinked and lifted his head. Sorry, I've been told I got no concept of personal space. Clearly, Luffy just hummed and then asked, are there elements called californium and europium in the periodic table? Ryuju blinked at the random question. Yeah, why? Why are they named that? What? Why are they named like that? I don't know. Why do you want to know? Just wondering. What about Einsteinium? It's named after Einstein, right? Yeah. So Einstein was a real person in this world too. He couldn't help but compare the two worlds and wonder how names of things ended up the same. Why are you so weird, Luffy? Ryuju asked with a sigh, not being able to understand this boy at all. Shishishishi. Don't just laugh. She snapped, smacking him on the head. Once I get my rubber powers back, this won't hurt at all. Luffy grumbled, rubbing where he had been hit. Ryuju just sighed. There's a book over there if you're interested about elements. Maybe it'll have the answer to your weird questions, she said, pointing at the bookshelf next to them. Ooh, okay. Luffy cheered, and 10 minutes later, for the first time in his life, Luffy willingly started reading a book. He really wanted to find out if places like California existed somewhere in this world. Ryuju just stared at the boyish curiosity on his face as he read the book for a few seconds before going back to her experiment. She would hear him giggling or laughing out loud from time to time, and when she asked what was so funny, as it was a chemistry book he was reading, he would tell the origins of the names of the chemicals, and she couldn't help but laugh too. It would nag at her, and she wanted to know why certain things were named like that too, and soon she found herself sitting on the ground next to him, going through some books, finding answers to his weird questions together. They both laughed and giggled when they actually found stuff like how californium was named that because the guy who synthesized that element had a dog called Collie who kinda went inside his lab and messed up everything. But because of that, some random chemicals got mixed in, and serendipitously, a new element was created. His dog had apparently died because some toxic chemicals ended up falling on it. So in honor of his dog, he named a new element for Collie. But someone messed it up and ended up calling it Collie, for indium was added to most element names, and thus californium was named. There were a ton more funny name origins for so many elements, and Luffy laughed his ass off reading about it, and by transitivity, Ryuju couldn't help but laugh too. Ryuju woke up with a start and was shocked to find herself still on the floor of her lab, leaning against a bookshelf with a sleeping Luffy next to her. She couldn't believe that she had let her guard down so much that she had fallen asleep next to someone who a part of her mind still thought could be a spy. Last night was very fun to say the least, and she couldn't believe how much she had genuinely smiled and laughed. She didn't remember the last time she had laughed as much as she had in the past 3 nights she had spent with Luffy. He had laughed at the most stupidest things, and even though she didn't find it that funny, she couldn't help break down into a fit of giggles hearing him laugh. His laugh was very infectious. She sighed at herself, wondering what the heck she was doing letting her guard down this easily in front of another, but she couldn't help but think that Luffy was honest. She was a master at reading people after all, so she knew that whatever Luffy said or did, he had no hostility in him. He said very strange things of wanting to meet Whitebeard, and even called him Giant Asen as if he was just some random person. Said his brother wanted to kill Whitebeard but also wanted to join his crew. Said that he was analyzed like a lab specimen a lot by another brother and a bunch more people. She had no idea what to make of all that, and he didn't seem like he wanted to talk more about it either. "Mornin'," Luffy mumbled as he got up, yawning and rubbing his eyes, and that brought her out of her musings. "Morning. You didn't do anything to me last night, did you?" Luffy blinked, confused at the question. "Do what?" Ryuju groaned internally again, cursing herself for making another suggestive joke. "Why the fuck doesn't he get flustered?" she screamed internally. "Nothing. Forget it." But Luffy took a few more moments to think about it before finally realizing what she meant. "Oh," he grinned. "Well, that should be a question I should direct at you. You're the pervert after all." Ryuju smacked him hard again. "I'm not a pervert." Shishishishi. Ryuju wanted to get back at him, so she picked up the poison she had created the previous night and injected it into him. Luffy was surprised, but before his mind even processed what had happened, he slumped down, losing consciousness, and his body started jerking as if he was having seizures. Ryuju watched for 2 seconds before what she had done hit her, and she panicked. The poison was not completely ready and still needed to be perfected, so she had just injected him with a poison she knew would kill the person. She immediately locked lips and sucked all the poisons out. "That was close," she sighed in relief after she was done and he was okay. She stared at the unconscious Luffy for a few moments before she realized how she had panicked seeing him almost die, and cursed herself. "Fuck, I've grown attached to the idiot." The last day of reverie was again less sucky to Ryuju compared to the first 5 days. Vivi had excitedly come up to her again, and the two had spent the entire morning together. They talked about some structures in the castle, their countries, swapped childhood stories, and so on. Ikiji came up to them while they were talking and tried to hit on Vivi, but Ryuju stopped him, saying she was just 14. And thankfully he went away. And that action had left Vivi staring at her with shining eyes and a happy smile. "She's so innocent. She must be protected at all costs," Ryuju thought when she saw her grateful eyes. In the afternoon, she got caught up with her brothers and some other nobles, which sucked, but she managed to soldier through, and soon the evening approached. Vivi came up to her again when the end came and, much to Ryuju's surprise, hugged her. After a moment of freezing up, she lightly hugged her back and patted her. They promised to meet again at the next reverie, and if one of them ever visited the other's country, to come greet them, and parted ways. All the other nobles also said goodbyes, which was lackluster compared to Vivi's pure intention goodbye, and soon it was time to leave. Ryuju, her brothers, and her father had a discussion that night where her father summarized what all had happened at the meeting. He had apparently made some deals with certain kingdoms which would empower them and also offended a few more. He also informed them that they wouldn't be going straight back home to North Blue but take a detour to South Blue, visit a few places as he had some business with them, and then go home. After the hours-long discussion detailing and planning everything, which stretched on well after midnight, they finally closed the meeting when it was early morning. Ryuju immediately went to the lab and, upon going inside, sank into her comfy chair and sighed deeply. She thought it was over and they could finally go back home, but now she had to spend more time in close proximity with her family. She didn't realize that she had chosen to go to Luffy instead of her own room to unwind. Subconsciously, she had wanted to see and talk to Luffy. "What's wrong? I thought you would be happy now that the reverie's done," asked Luffy, tilting his head in confusion. He had just spent the day training and had worked up quite a sweat. "Father decided where we'll go next. Earlier we were just gonna head home to North Blue, but there's been a change of plans. Something they talked at the meeting, I guess." "Oh, yeah, we'll be heading to South Blue first, visit a few places, and then go home to North Blue." Luffy smiled strangely at her and she tilted her head questioningly. "Are you sure you can just tell me stuff like this now? Aren't you scared anymore that I'll tell someone on the outside?" "Oh please, I feel stupid that I even suspected you being some sort of masterful spy. You're just so stupid. As if you could ever be a spy or be smart enough to even think things through." "Hey," Ryuju grinned. "So yeah, I'm 99% sure you aren't a spy. You're just a delusional lucky idiot." "Hey, haha, well, even if you are a spy, what can you do knowing where we are heading? Anyone can find that out if they followed us." Luffy pouted slightly at being called stupid so much. Now that he had Leo's frame of reference, he knew that he was indeed stupid and also knew how much of an idiot he actually was, and he was a bit embarrassed about it. Ryuju stared at him for a bit before she got serious and asked, "I'm gonna straight up ask you, was there any lie you told me since we met?" Luffy also got serious and stared back. "Well, I didn't lie per se, but I kinda said half-truths, I guess." That sunk Ryuju's heart and she actually felt a bit hurt, but she didn't let it show. "What do you mean half-truths?" It's complicated to explain, and if I actually told you the complete truth, you'll think I belong in an asylum." That erased whatever hurt she was feeling and just left her bewildered. What are you talking about?" "As I said, it's complicated to explain. I'll tell you one day when I actually have proof of it." He then trailed off thoughtfully. "Don't know how I'll get the proof though. I'm so lost. Have you lied to me or not? Was you being in the pit orchestrated or not?" No, nothing like that. I did end up in the pit because I got thrown out and saw you by chance." Luffy sighed, really thinking about how to explain himself and whether he should even divulge the truth. But he quickly decided against it. "You know what? Forget it. I'll tell you one day when I have a better way to explain it. Don't worry, it's nothing harmful. You'll just think I'm crazy, like actually needs help from a doctor, kinda crazy if I tell you. Ryuju just sat in complete confusion. What the hell are you talking about? Luffy groaned into his hands. Look, I don't want to explain because you'll think I'm crazy. Yes, more crazy than you already think I am. You'll just have to trust me on this. It's nothing harmful, it's nothing that concerns anyone. And I should learn to keep my mouth shut. He chided himself. He was just confusing her by saying stuff like this and decided to be more thoughtful next time and not just blurt out stuff. Seeing her still confused and wary face, he decided to change the topic. Well, okay, I'll tell you, he said, and scooted closer to her as if he was divulging some grand secret. She also bent down to listen to him intently. Luffy looked around himself, acting like he was making sure no one else was listening before looking back at her and whispered, I said I didn't have a leg fetish, but that's a half-truth though. I do have a thing for thighs. Ryuju just stared at him in shock, and Luffy managed to keep a straight face for 2 seconds before he fell on his back laughing his ass off. That's the half-truth, she yelled, kicking him. HLHLHLH in your face. You should have seen your face. HLHLHLH. Goddamn idiot. She smacked and kicked him a few times. She did realize that he was trying to change the topic by making a joke, but she let it go for now. Whatever he was hiding, she would get it out of him on another day. Ryuju just sighed after she got her frustrations out of her system by kicking him repeatedly. I should be killing someone like you who raises so many red flags, but at the same time, I don't think you mean any harm. Shishishishi, or maybe you just like me and want to keep me around so that I can lick why. Ryuju smacked him again and he just grinned. It had become a sort of comedy routine by now and she would never admit it, but Ryuju loved it. She enjoyed his company a lot. All his stupid jokes and stories, some of his weird quirks and questions had made her genuinely laugh more than she had ever done in her 20 years of living. And he had even helped her make a sort of friend in Vivi. Didn't know you could get attached to someone this quickly. She sighed. The thought of keeping him as her own slave forever instead of dropping him off somewhere did pass her mind. But she quickly swatted it away. She was never gonna become a monster like her family, and besides, Luffy was too motivated and had big dreams. The ship started moving, then bringing her out of her thoughts. We're leaving already? Luffy asked. Yeah, no reason to stay here anymore. She looked at the curious look on his face and asked, want to see outside? Luffy vibrated with excitement as he nodded his head vigorously. No matter what, this was the first island he had been on in the Grand Line as far as he knew at least, and he wanted to see it with his own eyes. Ryuju first unchained him and then pushed the bookshelf to the side and then pushed on the wall, which opened up like a door to the outside. Well, a secret door. No, you idiot. You do realize this is a lab, right? What if there's some major explosion or something? There are vents, sure, but it's better to have a door to the outside in case of emergencies. Ah, I see, Luffy said as he peeked out. The first thing he noticed was the massive wall of red in front of him that stretched out in either direction with its height rising well above the clouds. He only now recalled that Mariewa was on the red line, so he couldn't even see the capital right now. His eyes quickly left the wall though, and he stared down at the rich dark blue color of the sea, the rough and choppy waves. And it hit him that he was actually on the Grand Line. He was mesmerized by the dark bluish water and he stared at the sea in awe. He looked in the distance and saw a few massive cyclones of water rising high up into the clouds. In another direction, he spotted a massive sea king just chilling with its head above waters, apparently enjoying the early morning rays of the sun. He felt the harsh winds blowing on his face. He heard the chirps and cries of newscoos and a few other birds and sea creatures. He heard the rhythmic sound of the waves crashing against the ship. And he instantly knew that this is what he wanted to see and hear for the rest of his life. Wow, Ryuju noticed that he was actually looking at the sea instead of the red line and got confused. You're saying that about the sea? Yeah, Luffy breathed. It's beautiful. The thoughts he had had that seeing the places in the anime would ruin the actual thing for him flew right out of the window as he watched the shimmering sea. It was so gorgeous, and the anime didn't even manage to capture a % of its beauty. Ryuju watched the odd look on his face and wondered just what he found to be so amazing and tried to look for it herself but couldn't see anything. What's so amazing? She finally asked. The Grand Line. It's my first time laying eyes on it. This is where my dream lies. Oh, she finally realized that if his story was true, then this in fact would be his first time seeing it. She just stared at his face, which was bubbling with excitement and awe for a few seconds, and turned her gaze to the sea too. She took a moment to actually appreciate the beauty of the sea too, and she noticed things she had missed before. The salty taste in the air, the rhythmic and soft crashing of waves against the ship in the red line, the calming sounds of the birds and other sea creatures. And she breathed in deep, taking in all the rich salty air, and breathed out slowly. She then stared back at Luffy, who still had shining eyes and lips curled up into a massive grin. Yeah, there's no faking that. This really is his first time seeing the Grand Line, she concluded. She turned her gaze back to the sea and remembered the first time she had laid eyes on the Grand Line. She remembered having felt this sense of awe too, and she was sure she was looking at it just like how Luffy was doing now. She remembered her childish thoughts that the world was so much bigger than she had ever imagined. She remembered her mother's stories and realized that the world was vast. Truly realized it. And for a few seconds, she had imagined leaving her stupid family behind and going off on her own to find something or someone who could give her love and a feeling of home like her mother did. And then Judge ordered her to come to him, and her body moved without her permission and her wishful thinking died. She had projected that wishful thinking onto Sanji, seeing how he was free from their father's expectations. She helped him escape, imagining it was her who was escaping. She gave up every dream and wishful childish thought she had and hoped that Sanji could live it in her place, that he could find people who would love and accept him for who he was instead of her, that he would be free instead of her, that he would live for the both of them. Overcome by emotions and realizing that there was no way Luffy could be a spy, she did something she had never imagined she would ever do. She would later berate herself for being so impulsive, but right this moment, she didn't care. She took a leap of faith. "Hey Luffy," she muttered softly, "tell me more about Sanji." Her heart felt like it was beating 1,000 times a second, thinking that this was it. She had messed up. He would show his true colors now and everything would be all over. Someone would grasp her weakness now and her life would become more of a living hell from now on. But then Luffy just looked at her and gave her a smile. And that dispelled whatever scared thoughts she was having and replaced it with a warm, fuzzy feeling. "I don't know much, but I've heard he's an amazing cook. I can't wait to try out his cooking. He's really, really kind to everyone, more to women than to men, obviously." He chuckled, "But still, he's turned out great. He's also found a father figure in the owner of the restaurant he works at. Is he happy?" "Yeah, he's happy. But once he joins my crew, he'll be even more happy." Ryuju nodded with a small smile. "I see." The two stared back at the sea, feeling the winds rush past them, enjoying the comfortable silence. And then Ryuju frowned. "The hell do you mean he'll be more happy when he joins your crew? You haven't even talked to him yet. Stop deciding things for him." "Shishishi, don't worry. He'll join me. What if he refuses? Then I'll refuse his refusal." "It doesn't work like that, idiot." Sounds of shishishis and bickering and chiding continued in Ryuju's lab as the Germa ship left Mariewa. "We were on a gigantic snail this whole time?" Luffy asked, surprised as he watched the two huge elongated eye stalks of the snail ship they were currently on. It had been a few minutes since they left Mariewa, and he had been so lost in the Grand Line waters that he hadn't even noticed the front of the ship nor the ship itself until then. After seeing the snail, he looked at the rest of the ship and realized there were a couple of castles on the ship. And then he realized that he himself was inside an actual castle. The ship had actual buildings on it. "Yeah, our whole kingdom is like this," Ryuju answered with a smile. "Right, seafaring kingdom," Luffy said, only now recalling it. Their whole kingdom was built on the backs of multiple gigantic snails that could disengage from one another. "Yep, this is just a small snail ship we use for travel. We'll be meeting up and docking with another larger ship we left near an island as it was too big to bring to the docks of Mariewa." "I see." Luffy nodded in amazement. Even Leo's world, with as much widespread technology as it had nothing like this. Then again, he thought that he shouldn't be too surprised. This world had cyborgs like Frankie and Kuma, and also the Germa and the world Goft had human cloning technology. Guess science is more advanced in this world, but it's isolated to certain people and regions and not at all widespread, Luffy concluded sagely. "Any preference?" Ryuju asked, handing a small map to Luffy. He studied the map for a second before looking back up at Ryuju with confusion. "What? The island you want to be dropped off at?" "These are the islands we're gonna stop at, so if you know any, you can get off there," she said as she traced a finger over a path marked on the map. There were tons of sea currents and sea routes marked on the map which he didn't understand, but basically inferred that they were gonna stop at 4 islands in the Grand Line before heading to South Blue via the Com Belt. Luffy saw all the names of the islands in their path, but didn't recognize any. Going to the New World in search of Giant Asen is out of the question, huh? You'll die. Plain and simple." Luffy nodded with a sigh. He had already thought of all ways he could get in touch with Ace, but it all required him to traverse the Grand Line by himself, and he also didn't know where exactly Ace was to even have a destination. He also didn't know where Whitebeard was either, so that was even more of a hurdle. So, Thatch's murder was something he couldn't prevent. "Then I guess I'm just going back to East Blue. Any suggestions on where I can get passage to East Blue from any of these islands?" "You can't navigate. I'm pretty sure I'll die within 30 minutes if I tried navigating the Grand Line." Ryuju sighed. "And you dream of becoming the Pirate King?" "I'll have my navigator when I set out." Yeah. Anyway, no. I don't think there are any ships heading into any of the blues from the Grand Line, especially to East Blue. Maybe marine ships, and if you're lucky, you can find some pirates who are heading that way." Luffy frowned. "The closest island to the entrance then. I'll think of something when I get there." Ryuju also frowned, but suddenly realizing something said, "You know, it's easier to get passage to East Blue from South Blue rather than the Grand Line or even the North Blue. There are some merchant companies that do trade in between the 4 blues, and you can probably find a merchant cargo ship in South Blue that's heading to East Blue and hitch a ride on it." She wanted Luffy to stay. She had only spent 4 days with him, enjoying his company a lot, and had even impulsively opened up to him a bit by asking about Sanji. She wanted to spend more time with him, and also, the journey to South Blue would be more fun with him around. Sure, Luffy just shrugged and accepted. He wasn't good at geography or navigation, and Leo's memories didn't hold any information about exact routes either, so he just decided to trust Ryuju. He was sure he could travel on any of the blues without dying at least. Besides, he had never been to any of the other blues before, so he thought it would be nice to explore a bit of South Blue before going back. Ryuju was surprised, as she thought she would have to convince him more. Just like that, tilting his head, Luffy just said, "Yeah. You said it's better, so it's better." "Well, okay then," Ryuju happily chirped. "Guess we'll be spending more time with one another then. It'll take about a month and a half to travel to a South Blue island from here." Seeing the happy expression on Ryuju's face, Luffy thought that he should make her life as joyful as possible for the short duration he would stay with her. He didn't know what would happen in the far future when the whole Cake Island arc happens. And he didn't care either, as he was sure he would have deviated from the story by then. A few hours later, they reached the larger snail ship that Ryuju had mentioned, and it really was much larger than Luffy had anticipated. It had numerous buildings on it and even had roads and pavements. It looked like a small city almost. The buildings reminded Luffy of medieval Europe castles and towers, but with a more modern touch. All the castles and towers were made of stone bricks with conical-shaped roofs, and the pavements and roads were made with stone brick tiles. And the snail the city was on was also massive, and much to Luffy's shock, he would later learn that this larger ship he thought was a big part of their kingdom turned out to be just a small travel ship they used for long travels, and the actual snails that their kingdom was on were much more massive. The smaller Luffy was then led outside the lab, and he and Ryuju walked through the castle, making their way outside to board the bigger ship. His eyes brimmed with curiosity, seeing all the new stuff and the massive infrastructure. As the two walked towards the bigger ship, Luffy laid his eyes on Vinsmoke Judge for the first time. Judge was a massive man and looked pretty much like what he did in the story, including the mask on his face and his pointy mustache. Ikiji, Niji, and Yanji also came out of their own castles, and the entire family made its way towards the bigger ship. Luffy was following behind Ryuju, holding onto a few bags like he was her attendant, and she had asked him not to make trouble for her and to just keep his mouth shut and head down, so he tried to keep quiet. "Wait, is that my shirt?" Ikiji suddenly asked, pointing at Luffy. Ryuju had brought him a change of clothes from Ikiji's wardrobe, which Luffy was currently wearing. It was just a bit too big for him, but he made it work. "Yeah, he didn't have any clothes, so I took one from your room," Ryuju answered nonchalantly. "Problem? No, but that was one of my favorites." "Oh, hush you. All your shirts are pretty much the same," Ryuju rebuked. "Yeah, Ikiji, it looks just like the one you're wearing right now," Yanji piped up with a grin. That started a small argument with Ikiji and Yanji, and Niji also joined in a minute later while Ryuju rolled her eyes at them, and Judge didn't even care one bit. Luffy just watched them and thought that they just seemed like normal siblings. But he remembered how they had abused Sanji during his childhood and also Cosette during the WCI arc, how they didn't care one bit if they were dying or their siblings and father were dying, and knew they were monsters. But Luffy didn't feel any hostility towards them. They were just products of genetic engineering after all, and had just lost their emotions. If anyone was to blame, it was the bastard of a father they had. He also saw the multiple servants and soldiers on the ship. There were some normal maids, butlers, and servants, but what caught his attention were the multiple sets of nearly identical men and women walking around the ship, who he soon realized were clones. He recalled that there were different types of clones in the Germa kingdom, each having their own characteristics, like ones with huge broad shoulders, ones with short bodies, ones with tall and slim bodies, and so on. Ryuju and the others all split up soon, and she led Luffy to a huge castle. Apparently, each sibling had their own castle they could build in any way they wanted, and the huge castle in front of him was Ryuju's. It had multiple floors and even 2 towers protruding at the top that served as a sort of second and third terraces. Luffy was given the short tour of the castle and found that the first 2 floors just had normal house rooms like bedrooms, kitchen, etc. The third floor was her lab, and the highest floor was just an observation deck with a fantastic view. One of the protrusion towers, which served like a second terrace, was an open pool with a bar attached to it, and the other protrusion tower was a fully equipped high-class gym. It was extravagant, fancy, screamed rich, and pretty much looked like a 7-star hotel from Leo's world. Luffy was marveling at how huge and cool it all looked when Ryuju spoke up. "Well, it's a small castle, but this is just an outhouse ship we use for travel, so I didn't have it built that extravagantly. Our actual home is the Vinsmoke Castle, which is in the middle of the main ship, and that castle is adequately sized," she said with no hint of sarcasm. Luffy just sweat dropped and muttered, "Damn rich people." "What was that?" Ryuju asked dangerously. Nothing. Luffy placated. He didn't care about luxury and all in the first place, and Leo wasn't a materialistic person either, so his memories didn't affect him. He was absolutely fascinated with the third floor where Ryuju's lab was, though. There weren't just poison-related stuff in the lab, but also many cool gadgets and weapons she had developed which seemed straight out of science fiction. There were 3D printers, taser staffs, cool guns with lots of different funky designs and functions, snail forms of dials which did stuff like record and print pictures and play sounds. And the most interesting thing of all was a small cloning machine. She had an actual miniature-sized cloning machine that fit on a desk in her lab, and Luffy vibrated with excitement when he saw it. Ryuju told him that this particular machine could only clone small animals like rodents and that she mainly used it to create more mice clones for testing her poison. She didn't mention anything about human cloning or how most of the people on the ship were clones, as it was supposed to be a secret, and Luffy didn't bring it up either. Luffy quickly fell into a sort of routine on the ship. He spent the first few days to recover from his injuries, where he trained just a bit, but after he healed sufficiently, he started to train seriously like never before. The gym in Ryuju's castle was his favorite place to spend his time, and as he had soon realized that it would help him grow much more stronger. Actually, calling it a gym was a disservice to it, as it had amazing tech that Luffy had never seen before. There was a treadmill, but the speeds at which it could go was insanely high. There were dumbbells and barbells, but one could attach as much weights as needed without it seeming too bulky. There were step mills, pull-down machines, and many other gym equipment, but these were just way more high-tech and more challenging. For example, the treadmill. Not only did it have insane speeds he had never seen before, it could also fill up with water up to the waist, thus making running on it more challenging. Well, that was what Luffy thought at first, as the liquid was transparent like water, but when he tried it, he found that it wasn't water but a highly dense and viscous liquid in which taking a single step was a Herculean task, thus increasing its difficulty exponentially. And those were just the equipment he recognized. There were many more insane equipment which made him excited. There was a machine that was just a straight-up compress machine which would push down on someone. There was a sort of small padded room in which the walls and ceiling all had guns and cannons which would automatically fire projectiles like cannonballs, arrows, bullets, etc. at a person inside the room. They were random too, so there was no pattern either, thus making it difficult to dodge them. To train observation hacky, Luffy concluded correctly. There was also what Luffy thought was a wooden dummy he had seen in some martial arts movies, but when he tried it, he found out all the bars would actually move unpredictably and also hit back with enough force to make him yelp in pain. Luffy's jaws were on the floor the first time Ryuju had demonstrated all those equipment, and he had instantly started training with excitement. He would train for at least 4 hours in the mornings before taking a break, then train for another 6 hours in the afternoon, break again, and end the night with another 3 hours of training. He also did all his training while wearing the sea stone cuffs. In the story during the Wano arc, Luffy had been put into sea stone cuffs too and made to work in the prison mine. His muscles had visibly bulked up by the time he got the cuffs removed, and he had gotten much stronger, so he realized it was a very effective training method and thus decided to put himself through it. It was very hard at first. Even though he had gotten used to being in the sea stone cuffs, it didn't mean he didn't feel extremely weak all the time. But he soldiered on, knowing that this would give him an incredible boost in strength. When Luffy wasn't training, he would spend his time in Ryuju's lab, the pool, or her bedroom. The two were practically inseparable, and the only times they weren't together was when Ryuju had to go to her family for meals or meetings. Even when Luffy was training, Ryuju would spend her time in the gym and had even moved some of her lab equipment inside the gym so she could chat with him while she performed her experiments and he trained. She would also train every day with him, but not as much as him, of course. Most of the stuff in the gym was really simple for her, as she was exponentially stronger than Luffy, and she just treated what Luffy was struggling with as a warm-up exercise. The two also held sparring sessions together, which left Luffy frustrated as hell, as she could just stand in a single spot and deflect any attacks he threw at her quite easily. He was frustrated seeing the massive chasm of strength between himself and her, but he berated himself for thinking like that and told himself not to rush things. She was New World levels of strong, so her strength was to be expected. It would take time and a lot of effort before he became as strong as her. He also realized that he would be facing people who were as much as and even more stronger than Ryuju in the Marineford War, and he knew he wasn't ready in the slightest. That was his major goal, actually, to get strong enough to have a better chance at saving Ace. He was pretty sure that Ace wouldn't stop chasing after Teach even if he told him that it would lead to a war. The two had promised not to interfere in each other's adventure and to also live without regrets. So Luffy knew stopping Ace from going after Teach would be almost impossible. He would at least tell him all about Teach's powers, but who knew how the battle between them would turn out. Even Shanks was wary of Teach, so he definitely had some secret that made him so dangerous. Either way, for now he decided to train like he was preparing for the Marineford War. Apart from the war, another failure of his was in Thriller Bark, where Zoro tries to give up his life for him. It was something he didn't like one bit, no matter how badass the scene was for Zoro. It was his failure as a captain, and there was no way in hell he was going to allow that to happen. So, he had to be strong enough so that he could face Moria and then also Kuma back to back. Another failure was with Aokiji and Long Ring Long Island. He knew he wouldn't get strong enough to defeat an admiral that early, but he could at least prepare enough to put up a decent fight. He sighed when he thought about his adventure. He didn't like that he knew all these future events already, but he was also grateful for it as it gave him his wake-up call way earlier. Losing his entire crew in Sabayati and then losing Ace in the war was the wake-up call for his story counterpart. And it was only then that he had realized how outclassed he really was. But in this reality, he had gotten his wake-up call much earlier when he got enslaved. The existence of Sea Stone was a shocking revelation to him, and the days he spent in his solitary cage made him realize that he was weak. All the events that led up to him dying in the pit had made him realize he was really weak. And then he got Leo's memories of his adventure, which just made him realize that he wasn't just really weak. He was utterly and hopelessly weak and outclassed. He needed to get stronger no matter what, and so he pushed himself to extreme degrees and trained even after he was well past his limits. Even Garp would have been horrified to see how Luffy trained. And considering how he threw a 4-year-old child into a pack of ferocious wolves in the name of training, that was saying something. Seeing him like that, however, had left Ryuju really worried, as the way he was abusing his own body in the name of training was nothing short of horrifying. He would push himself so much that she had to actually inject some sleeping agents into him when he went too far so that he wouldn't kill himself from exhaustion. She understood why he pushed himself that much, though. She had seen his horrible wounds after all, and now that she believed his story, she realized that he must have been through a lot and was training so hard so that he would never be in such a situation ever again. After he healed enough to have his bandages removed, she also realized in horror that the long burn slash across his back was supposed to be the hoof of the flying dragon. She hadn't realized it in the beginning as it was covered with lots of other wounds. But now that those wounds were healing, the slash burn mark stood out. Those who didn't know about the mark wouldn't recognize it, but the people who knew would be able to tell due to the color and its vague shape after observing it closely. She had also treated him by herself so that no one else would see it, and didn't even take him to the ship's doctor, afraid that he might out Luffy. She didn't want to ask him about his time with the celestial dragons either, as she was sure it was a lot of bad memories. He must have felt useless and hopeless all that time when he was enslaved, and thus he was training like this now so that he wouldn't feel like that ever again. She didn't like that he was pushing himself so much, but there was nothing much she could do for him other than have spars with him and help him train. As much as Ryuju enjoyed spending time with Luffy and had let her guard down around him, a part of her couldn't help but think that he was someone suspicious and needed to be avoided. She hated that she felt that way towards someone she had opened up to so much, but she just couldn't help herself. Luffy was way too weird and knew about things he shouldn't. For example, they were talking one day and she had casually mentioned the existence of CP0, saying how strong they were, and he had nodded along, saying that yes, they were indeed crazy strong. She hadn't noticed it at that moment, but when she later thought about it, she was gobsmacked, as the existence of CP0 was a sort of secret that only the top of every faction knew about. A no-name from East Blue like Luffy shouldn't even have known CP0 existed. Another incident was that even though he claimed to have never left East Blue, he was very well informed about the Grand Line. No one normal from East Blue should have knowledge about Paradise, let alone the New World. It had taken her an embarrassingly long time to realize that he shouldn't even have known what the New World was. The incident that made her extremely suspicious was when he had casually asked if she knew any revolutionaries. When she had asked why, he had said that he wanted to talk to Dragon of all people, the revolutionary dragon. She was befuddled, and when she asked why he wanted to talk to him, he just said it's a secret and didn't elaborate any further. The suspicious and distrustful part of her brain was screaming at her that Luffy was someone that shouldn't be trusted, that he was a spy collecting all sorts of information on her, and that she should lock him up somewhere and interrogate him for answers. But the same suspicious part of her brain was perplexed, as no one in their sane mind would actually just straight up ask questions like he did if they were a spy. He was making himself look so suspicious, and if he was a spy, that would be the last thing he would have done. Unless it's a double fake out, and he was doing that because he would think that I would think that a spy wouldn't do this. She sighed. But most importantly of all, her intuition was telling her that she could trust Luffy. She was really good at reading people and had a sharp intuition that had helped her sniff out traitors before, and that very same intuition was telling her that Luffy could be trusted. But logically, she couldn't help but think he was suspicious. Her brain was malfunctioning thinking about Luffy. Ryuju felt a sharp flick on her forehead, and she realized that Luffy was in front of her, looking at her with confusion. "You okay?" Yeah, she waved him off. It had been less than a week since they had left Mariewa, and currently, the two were in the gym where Luffy was training, and she was just lounging around. "Something's bothering you though," Luffy pressed on. Ryuju just stared at him for a few moments before sighing. "It's about you. You're giving me a headache again." "What did I do this time?" Luffy asked, puzzled. "You're suspicious. Again? I thought you trusted me now. Didn't you let it slip that Sanji was in fact alive?" Ryeju groaned into her hands for that impulsive decision. I did. And it's not that I don't trust you. You're just way too suspicious. Luffy sighed and sat down on the floor in front of her. Okay, let's clear this up. What makes you doubt me? Ryeju also sat down in front of him and started her questioning. First off, why do you know so much about the Grand Line? You even know what New World is and even about some islands in the New World and Paradise. Well, if it's about my knowledge, then Leo told me all about it. Okay, and how did Leo know? He just did. He liked to read a lot and knew of all sorts of things and secrets of this world. Where's he from? Nashville, but he moved to New York later. USA basically. You won't find that place anywhere on any map as it's a sort of secret country almost, not affiliated with the world government or any faction for that matter. And they don't interfere with anything that goes on in the rest of the world either. This, Ryeju exclaimed accusingly. How is this not suspicious? A secret country? What the hell? It's just a country no one knows about in the wider world. Why is that so suspicious? Luffy asked, honestly confused. He thought this cover was pretty good, and it wasn't entirely untrue either, as Leo's world wouldn't be found by anyone in this world, nor does Leo's world affect this world in any way. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.